And the 10-minute countdown has begun. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's pre-show for the 220-1102 A+ study group. Hello, chat room. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. We've got about 10 minutes to go. You can see we're at 11:50 my time. At 12 noon, we will be starting the actual event where you'll be able to see me like this. Until then, we'll sit here and try to figure out if we've got recordings going. We do. If streaming is working, it is. We'll make sure all of those I's are dotted, etc., etc., etc. Let's see how this goes. Okay. Hey, chat room. Let's see if I can get the chat room working. I can. This works great. So, for instance, we can see folks from Webster MA. Thanks for being here. So, Alfonso, we're not exactly a 1102 question, but we'll talk about it anyway. Can you please tell me if hashing can be reversed? It cannot be reversed because once you hash, there's no way to go back. It's a hash we often refer to as a fingerprint. Like let's take a dictionary, a digital version of a dictionary, and create a hash of it. Well, how are you supposed to get the digital dictionary back up after the hash? It's just like a fingerprint. If somebody takes my fingerprint, I can't somehow have that fingerprint make me back. Like let's reverse the fingerprint and make all of me. Doesn't work that way. So no, you can't reverse it. Now, if you went around and took fingerprints from everybody in the city and then compared those fingerprints, you would eventually find that the fingerprint pointed to me. So I guess if you wanted to call that a reverse engineering, I guess you could. But that's not truly what it is. That's truly a brute force. So that's my recommendation. That's what I would say for this. St. Vincent in the house. Hey, Malk, thanks for being here again. Still, do you ever leave, Malk? Are you always here? You're always so consistent. We sure appreciate you being here. It seems like you're just always in the chat. We thank you for that. Thanks so much. Let's see what else is going on here. Her in the chat room. Lots of folks checking in. Thanks for being here. Got Texas checking in. Hello, Tejas. Thanks for being here. We have, speaking of Texas, Houston's here. Thanks, Jeff, for being here. And, of course, New York. Thanks for being here as well. Got folks in Aruba. This is great. Thanks for being in the chat. We got a lot to go through today. I've got all new questions from the 220-1102, and we'll go through that as well. Coyocho is here. Thanks for being here on the 826 on the big curve. LA. So we're getting folks from the other side of the country. San Francisco is here, and Washington, D.C. is here. What is that? What is my favorite programming language I have learned? I don't learn programming languages, but I got some great scripting languages that I have learned. And I often say, if you're going to learn a scripting language, go learn PowerShell and Python. Those are the two. You know those two and stick them on a resume, and you really know them. You can really use them. You can really script with them. Your jobs are going to be coming in. You'll be able to make lots of decisions about different positions because everybody wants those skills. Programming, though, I don't do programming. Well, I sort of used to do programming. Once upon a time, back in the day, I did have a software development company. I say company, it was me. And I was creating software for Novell NetWare systems. That gives you an idea. I know. I must have been, 4 or 5 years old. That must have been it. I'm pretty sure. But that was just Visual Basic, talking to some APIs. The APIs were the things really doing the hard lifting, the heavy lifting. It really wasn't me doing any specific programming. And if you look at programming that I have done, if you look at legitimate, even the scripts I have written, they're not good. They are not well laid out. There's not a lot of thought that goes into the variables. There's very spotty documentation. That's when I knew that perhaps a career in software development was really not for me. But if you had to do those, that's what I would do. More Texas, more folks checking in from South Africa, and the folks over in Salt Lake, over in Utah. Thanks for being here. More California, San Jose. Haven't been to Tasman Drive in a while, but I'm sure it's still there, right? Cisco's still there. It's still there. I think that's how pretty much all of these work, to be able to do that. I mention Python, I mention PowerShell. Those are just two very popular and very powerful examples to position you. But other types of scripting languages, go learn a lot of Perl. Go learn even traditional languages such as C++ or others, or any other type. The idea when you learn a language is there are some fundamentals you're learning. You're learning about variables. You're learning about, in some cases, object-oriented programming, perhaps some loops. Those types of fundamentals really apply to all of the different programming languages. So there you go. Is Security Plus more marketable than A+? I don't know. Who are you asking? Are you asking a hiring manager who's looking for people who have their A+, or are you asking a hiring manager who's looking for people that have their Security Plus? So there's the interesting part, isn't it? It's not really about trying to strive towards getting the highest level certification there ever exists in the world, and that somehow doing that will justify your specific knowledge. What you're trying to do is match your requirements, or what you've learned, your certifications, with what employers are looking for. And if those two match, you've got a job. The hiring manager could be looking for A+. You have an A+, boom, you got a job. The hiring manager looking for A+, you show up with Security Plus, sorry, but we're looking for A+, folks. So it could work both ways. It could work the other way too. I mentioned also, and if you're someone who is in the DC area, for example, a lot of employers would like you to see Security Plus. So if you live in Virginia, Maryland, DC, in that area, you may find that Security Plus is more valuable than A+. It really depends on the context. A certification is as valuable as someone applies to it, as a hiring manager requires it. We don't just go out and get these certifications because someone told us the cert is good. This is an investment of months of your time. There is a financial investment. You should be learning certifications that match the requirements of the hiring managers. Always, always, always. If that's your goal. Now, some people just like to get a certification so they learn more. That's great. I would probably guess the vast majority of people that were trying to get a job or get a better job in this industry. So Spacefold is finished. The 1102 video series, great. Well, we'll see. We're going to find out how much you remember today. Absolutely. We'll go through a number of questions. We'll see how it works out to be able to make that happen. We've got a few minutes left. We got 2 minutes to go. Exactly 2 minutes. Look at that. I should probably get my place all working here. Could you get an A+ certification within 20 days of studying? If you have an existing knowledge base of this specific content, you could do it in 3 days. But if you're starting fresh with at the very bottom, I would say the average for getting an A+ certification for just one of those certs, you need two, of course, you need to pass both exams. For getting one of those exams done, you're talking 2 to 3 months on average. So 20 days would be, as I often say, 20 days would be remarkably aggressive. And that's really putting it politely. That would be remarkably aggressive. That's very bright. Let's see if we can adjust brightness here just a tad. Just bring it down. Bring it down, everybody. Better. Probably doesn't look any different for you, but it does to me. Okay. And now I'm getting flickering from my aux port again. Oh, I can't really get it done. Can't really. It was fine on Tuesday, and now on Thursday, of course, it isn't. That's another thing for me to do once we're done with the live stream today. My life is mostly cables and power adapters. I think that's mostly it. Tab this. All right, we got about 30 seconds to go. Let's see if I can get more of these things done here. There's Keynote. Give me a green light. There it is. Love it. Okay, we got presentation ready to go. You're here. What more do we need? I think we're in pretty good shape for this. Videos look good. Camera sections. Okay. That's pretty good. I think we're in good shape. I think we can now see if we can get at least the graphic up. I think we can do that. There it is. And let's get started, everybody. Top of the hour. Let's do a live stream. Here we go. Hello, everyone. That was abrupt. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the December 2022 Professor Messer A+ study group. This is our Core 2 A+ study group. If you were here a couple of days ago, we did a Core 1 A+ study group. So all of the questions and everything we talk about today will come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives specific to the Core 2 study group. So at least we have some things that we can work towards to kind of get you in the mode of thinking about how to pass the 220-1102 exam. So everything we talk about today will be very specific to that Core 2 exam. And as you step through the questions, you'll start to see that today. Now, if you are here live, and thank you for being here live, then you will be able to participate by visiting this website. Pop open a new browser window and browse over to professormesser.com/QA. because there's a question that's waiting for you. They will all appear on that screen. There is also an app that you can get for this. It's called the Socrative Student app. And if you download and use the app, it asks you for a room name. That room name is Professor Messer, ProfessorMesser. So if you do that, you'll get the same questions, except it will be on your mobile app. This question comes from a question we did 2 months ago in October. So we call this our rewind question to see if you remember these things that we did in a previous study group. And of course, these questions do apply towards the 220-1102 exam objectives. This question asks, a user has received this error, quote, "The controller does not have enough resources for this device," end quote. Which of the following would be the best next troubleshooting step? Would it be move USB devices to different ports, reinstall the OS, add more RAM, upgrade the BIOS, or restart the computer? Now, if you think you know the answer, please don't answer in the chat room. That's our #1 rule. No answers in the chat room, no hints in the chat room. Instead, follow the links that are right there on the screen. There's the link, professormesser.com/QA. That is the link that will allow you to answer this question. Now, if you are watching this on a replay, that link is not going to be available for you. Make sure you check our calendar, professormesser.com/calendar, so you can be here next time, so you can follow along with all of us as we answer these questions. We will come back to this question in just a bit and see how you answered as we get into it. Well, we've got a lot to go through today, but I want to remind you that if you're someone who is keeping up with what we do here, you'll probably also want to keep up with what we do when we're not here live and in person. You can follow us on YouTube at professormesser.com/YouTube, on Twitter, on Instagram. Just type in professormesser.com/Twitter/Instagram/YouTube/LinkedIn/ wherever you would like to find me, wherever it happens to be. That would be a good place to go if you're looking for this. Whenever I start going through and trying to find at least the right place, there's never one place. So just keep track of all these different places. And of course, our daily pop quiz questions can be found on Twitter and Instagram or in your email. So there might be a good one. In fact, there were other people. Someone in the chat just mentioned, hey, what about Discord? Why don't you think of making a Discord? Well, you can join thousands of us that are already on the Professor Messer Discord by going to, we'll go back to that screen, professormesser.com/Discord. There you go. Yeah, how about that? That is the fastest turnaround for a question I've had today. Hey, how about we do a Discord? Done, finished, up and running. In fact, that's a great place to go when we're done here, because we're usually hanging out in the Discord when we are not doing one of these live streams. So thank you for asking. Nice segue. The A+ exam itself the A+ certification consists of 2 separate exams. So you already have to put this into account. Today, we're going to talk specifically about the 220-1102 exam. I've got the wrong numbers up here. Look at that. I think the next slide will show the new one. There we go. The old one was retired. In fact, if you were studying for the 1001 and 1002, those retired on October the 20th. Now we're on the newer exams, the 220-1101 and the 220-1102. Those exams were released in April of this year, so they've been out about 6 or 7 or 8 months now. We have an exam retirement estimation somewhere around November of 2025, October, November timeframe. That's probably about right. So if you are indeed watching and planning to take the 220-1101 or 220-1102, you're in exactly the right place. These are 2 exams. Both exams are 90 minutes each. The 1101, you need to score 675 on a scale from 100 to 900. On the 1102, you need to score a 700 on a scale from 100 to 900. And as soon as you pass your exam, you are certified for 3 years. So don't wait around on this. Certainly don't wait until the estimated retirement date of November 2025. These certifications are only good if you've earned them and you've got them in your pocket. So make sure you spend some time going through the objectives over at professormesser.com/objectives. Now, there are also a number of topics or domains, they call them in the CompTIA world. We will be talking about those domains. So the questions we have today will discuss operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, operational procedures, and potpourri. Those different domains are documented in the exam objectives. This is one of, I don't know, 1 million times I will mention the exam objectives today. So go to professormesser.com/objectives. When you pass your exam, you are certified for 3 years, regardless of what the exam retirements might be. Once you pass your exam, it doesn't matter what they do with the exams. They could change the exams every day. Doesn't matter. You're certified. But that's why they do that every 3 years, to keep up with things. You could wait until the very last day. This is what happened in October. People waited until the last possible day for those exams. They passed their exams, and even though that version of the exam retired the next day, they were certified for 3 years. So another nice thing to think about. This video will be available for replay immediately afterward on YouTube. Something that happens automatically. I also create an audio-only version of this study group, and I distribute them in a podcast format. You can find out about those at professormesser.com/podcast. I have A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus study groups listed there. You can find a lot of good information, very similar to the format we do here in the live stream. You just can't see the screens as they come up. It's a podcast, so it's great for taking to the gym, when you're driving, something you can use to continue to help know what these topics are referring to. A nice study material. Keep that in mind as well. If you wait about a day, I will also have added to the YouTube video description all of these timestamps so that you'll know exactly what happens when during this live stream. I say I will add it. I don't add anything. My marketing manager, Lori, who's watching the replay. Hey, Lori, how you doing? We obviously talked. Somebody said, is the only time you talk to Lori is during the live streams? No, we do chat and send messages and text message and do other things when we're not doing live streams. But the most important part is she's watching this and putting in all of these timestamps. You can go back years with these videos and look at the timestamps. It's really great to have that. Thank you, Lori, for doing this. Everybody in the chat, if you're someone who's used this, be sure to thank Lori for that too. She's watching the chat replay go by as well. It'd be a nice place to give her a little bit of a shout out, which she absolutely deserves. As I mentioned, we do have a Discord. You can go to professormesser.com/Discord. Join us. We're usually in there chatting and doing different things. Some people will even have study groups together. They'll get into an audio room. Someone will share a screen, and they'll watch videos together. It's a great community. Folks who are really trying to help everyone improve and get their certification. Join us there at professormesser.com/Discord. I also would like to remind you that eventually you're going to need to take these exams. And you could certainly go to the CompTIA website and pay full price for the exams. But why would you do that? Why would you pay more money for a voucher that you could get on professormesser.com/vouchers for a discount? It's exactly the same voucher, has exactly the same capabilities, but it's only available at professormesser.com/vouchers, and you don't need a coupon code. You don't need a special referral screen. There's nothing extra you have to do. They're just already discounted. So that's something that helps as well. Find it at professormesser.com/vouchers. And if you buy the vouchers on my site, I'll even give you more than what someone else might give you. For example, you get a free copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. I've taken all of the hints and tips and tricks that I've learned through the years in taking probably now about 20 to 25 industry certifications, and I put them together into one little guide that gives you an idea of things you might want to do during your studies and even things you can do during the exam to perhaps give you a couple of extra points. Find out about that. Get your voucher, get your free Exam Hacks ebook. They are available for folks who are in US and Canada only, unfortunately, right now, but you're able to get those from professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to that question I asked earlier, which was this one. A user has received this error. The controller does not have enough resources for this device. Which of the following would be the best next troubleshooting step? Is it move USB devices to different ports, reinstall the OS, add more RAM, upgrade the BIOS, or restart the computer? Let's see how you answered. We'll show the results. We have a mixed bag, don't we? 38% of you say add more RAM. 33% of you say move USB devices to different ports, and 21% of you say restart the computer. I think restart the computer is a great idea, but not the right answer in this case. It seems like that should be the default right answer for everything, but that would probably make the exam a little bit too easy. Single digit, 6% of you said upgrade the BIOS, and 2% said reinstall the OS or the operating system. This is a very specific message that comes up. And when it talks about the controller does not have enough resources for this device, the controller is referring to a USB controller. And I know there's lots of controllers inside of your computer. There's hard drive controllers, there's memory controllers, there's all kinds of controllers. But this specific error is referring to resources available for your USB devices. There are a specific set of what in the USB world is called endpoints. These endpoints are used as communication and buffering mechanisms for different USB devices. And depending on the USB device you're using, it may use a different set or different number of these endpoints. So a mouse, for example, might use a smaller number of endpoints than a USB scanner or another USB device that you would plug in. Eventually, the controller that you're using, it has a certain number of endpoints available. And if you plug in a lot of USB devices like I do, you can easily exceed the capabilities of that controller. So you may want to move USB devices to a different interface because different groups of USB interfaces on your computer may be based on a completely different set of controllers. There may be multiple USB controllers in your computer, and by putting USB 2.0 devices on a 2.0 controller and USB 3.0 devices or 3.1 on a 3.x controller, you will be taking all of those resources and spreading them out towards multiple controllers, which might help you a little bit. So try to match those up if possible. That could be a challenge, however. If you're someone who knows nothing about USB and you obviously can't tell from the outside of your computer where these controllers are, then you're going to absolutely want to get to the manufacturer's documentation to see what interfaces are specific to what USB controllers inside of your system. So if we look at the answers, we can see that the correct answer was actually move USB devices to different ports. If you answered A, 34% of you got that one absolutely correct. In this case, the controller does not have enough resources is not saying your computer does not have enough memory. If you are having a problem with the memory in your system, you would want to add more RAM, but the error message you would get for that would be very specific. It would tell you you're low on memory, you're running out of memory, there's not enough memory for this action or this activity. It tells you in the operating system that it really is based on RAM. I'm not sure why this particular error message didn't say anything about USB. It doesn't say anything about connecting a USB device. It just says, we don't have enough resources on the controller. It could probably be a little more specific, but that is what it is referring to. And because this is a number of resources that are hard-coded into your system, then obviously restarting the computer is not going to help you very much. You're just going to have the same number of resources available after you restart. 6% of you said upgrade the BIOS, which does nothing to provide more resources and endpoints for the USB controller. And reinstalling the operating system has nothing to do with this. This is indeed a kind of a hardware issue. And by moving around the hardware, we might be able to resolve it. So answer A was the correct one. Moving USB devices to different ports. Who would have thunk it? 34% of you, though, got that one absolutely right. That is our rewind question of the month. And that should give you some perspective as to what you can expect for certain types of error messages. Make sure you read those error messages very, very carefully on your exam. That's a very important part of what we do. Now let's shift gears a little bit. As many of you know, when you take an A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus exam and other CompTIA exams as well, not all of the questions are multiple choice questions like this one. This is indeed a multiple choice question that has one answer and then multiple choices to be able to determine what that right answer might be. But CompTIA wants to ask you questions in other ways. They want to provide you with fill-in-the-blank questions, matching questions, putting things in a particular order, drag and drop questions. Now, obviously, the topics on these questions still come directly from the exam objectives, but they're simply asking you the questions in a different way. So let's do a question now that is a performance-based question. That's what CompTIA calls these types of questions. And in this case, it's a fill-in-the-blank question. Let's see how you do with this question that asks, at the Linux command line, view available drive space on the system. And there's your command line. Now, if you think you know this answer, please do not answer in the chat room. Please don't put any hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to follow the link that is right here on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and simply put your answer in on what you would type in to be able to see available drive space on this system. What could it possibly be? See if you remember your Linux. Obviously, in the 220.11.02, there are a lot of Linux commands you need to know. There's Mac OS you need to know. There's Windows that you need to know. So you're effectively needing to learn a little bit about at least 3 different operating systems as you step through this certification. And there are a lot of Linux commands on this exam objective. So make sure you're familiar with every single one of those. One of those is what we're looking for here. One of those exams is what we're hoping to find. So if you happen to know what command it would be, and I'm not necessarily looking for other things that might be with different command line prompts. I'm really just looking for the command. But if you want to add some additional options to the command to show some other things, I would also take that. We'll give you extra credit. Not that we give any credit at all for these, but I'll think it'll be extra credit for what you're doing. See if you happen to know what this command is. A number of you are putting this in. A number of you are really struggling with this one. Normally, when there's a question that everybody knows, they all jump in, and you can see the numbers start ramping up very quickly. Well, I'm noticing this one going a little bit slower. No Googling. You can't Google to be able to make that happen and figure out the details of it. I think that would be a good place to go if you're working through that. Folks in the chat room are wondering, wait, why did we get a question from an earlier video? The first question we do is a rewind question that goes back to the previous study group. Everything from this point forward is all brand new questions. We always do one old question to see if you remember the answer. And then secondly, it gives you a chance to see if you can get into the answer page and make sure you can answer the questions okay. So we'll be able to make that happen. But I write new questions every single month so that we never have to cycle through older questions with those and to make it happen. This would be a good one to step through. Let's see how you did with this one. We'll have to figure it out as we step through all of the different options that we have available for a command line. Specifically this command line. In fact, I put Linux, but I wanted to be sure you would choose Linux to do this. But at the Linux command line, view available drive space on the system. Interestingly enough, you'll probably notice as you step through these commands and do it yourself, and if you haven't done this already, you probably should. Grab a Linux distribution, load it into a virtual machine, run some of these commands in a VM is a great way to study. And you'll notice that this command and many of the Linux commands are exactly the same as the commands you might get in Mac OS. So once you learn these in one place, you'll be able to use that knowledge with other operating systems as well. But we want to view available drive space. Now, if you were in a Windows system, you can go to the command prompt and you can simply do a directory and see how much drive space was available. And there are some capabilities to do that with a directory entry here, but I want a more specific by volume breakdown. And the way you would do it is to use this command, which is the df command. There it is right there. The df command provides us with information about the drive and the disks that are in our system, broken out into a view of the file systems that are currently mounted. And you can see that this shows you 1K blocks, how many are used, how many are available, the percentage in use, and how they are mounted. Now, one of the problems I have with this, of course, is I can't count in 1K blocks. I don't know how much that is. If we look at, for example, the root directory on our system, it is, there's no commas here, so it's 64,067,008 1K blocks. Well, how much is that? I don't know. I'm a human being. I don't understand 1K block counting. Fortunately, the df command has a human readable option, since I am most of the time a human. So if you perform a df with a -h, you get this view, which for us humans sure helps a lot more. The df. So now if we look at the root, you can see that instead of having 1K blocks, it's really 62 gig to have this here. So this disk-free command can really give us a lot of information about this, but you can see it now in megabytes, gigabytes, and other human readable forms, which if you're looking at a system, puts things in a better context. It's a little bit easier to read, a little bit simpler to understand what's going on. Hopefully that can help you as well as you're going through these. So that is the df command. It's a very useful and powerful command. It stands for disk free, so you can view how much free space is in the file system. And there's a lot of options for these. The df-h is the one that we did here today. Those are good ones to use if you're someone working towards Linux and trying to find out more about the Linux commands that are here. They are all listed in the command, in the objectives for the exam. Make sure you're familiar with them. For those that asked earlier, well, how do you remember all of these different commands? Well, it is a challenge, but if you start using them, you will be able to be more familiar, and it'll get into your brain. Those synapses will start to fire a little bit better. So if you have not already, make sure you grab a virtual machine manager such as VirtualBox, such as the VMware products. If you're in Mac OS, you may want to run Parallels or something like that, or run VirtualBox in Mac OS. Load up a distribution of Linux. It doesn't matter which one. Find one that's popular, load it up, install it, and run it, and use some of these commands. It's a great way to remember what these happen to be. So absolutely what you should know. Let's do some more questions. So that was our performance-based question of the month. Let's now shift gears. Before we shift gears back, I do want to thank, I had a lot go by there, but I want to thank Charles in the chat room. Charles says that he passed his 1001 Core 1 exam last week. Your notes, practice exams, and videos really help. Thanks for all you do. And Charles with the $5 super chat in there as well. I didn't forget about you, Charles. Thanks for putting that in there. Thanks for your support of what we do. And congratulations on your Core 1. Now we have to do Core 2. Now it's the next one. So we'll have to work through that and be familiar with all of the different options available. Let's do some multiple choice based questions. We'll go back to multiple choice here. Maybe we'll do better than that first multiple choice we did. This one is asking this question. A company is using software that was compiled on company servers. Which of the following would describe this software? Would it be PII, AUP, GDPR, FOSS, or PHI? A company is using software that was compiled on company servers. Which of the following would describe this software? Is it PII, AUP, GDPR, FOSS, PHI? And yes, I know I'm not using exactly the right terms. I'm keeping everything consistent, but we'll break this out in just a bit and be more familiar with it. Go to professormesser.com/QA if you know the answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We'll sort of break down what these different options might be and how familiar you might be with some of these. Now, what's interesting is every single one of these apparent abbreviations that are here are in the exam objectives. So even if you think you know the answer and you've locked in your answer, look at the other answers as well. And if you don't recall or remember what that particular abbreviation is, make a note of it, because you'll want to go back to your exam objectives. You might get a question on your exam that deals with one of these abbreviations, even though it doesn't happen to be the answer to the question we're looking at here. Just so we're clear, I don't write the questions on the exam. I write the questions for our study group. I emulate or simulate the feel and look of the questions that you might get on your exam. But obviously, the exam is going to have a completely different set of questions. I get people emailing me all the time that say, oh, I got your practice exams book, and none of those questions were on the exam. That's right. They weren't. I'm not going to give you questions that are on the exam. Not only are there copyright issues with that, there are ethical problems with that. You don't want to get the questions before you walk into the exam room. So that is exactly what we would work through. Let's see how you did with this question. It asked, a company is using software that was compiled on company servers. Which of the following would describe this software? Is it PII, AUP, GDPR, FOSS, or PHI? FOSS, it's really FOSS, isn't it? That's the way we usually pronounce that. I was trying to stay a little bit consistent on this. Let's see how you chose. You can see, again, we've got a little bit of a mix of answers that are coming in. 30% of you, for example, said FOSS. We've got 24% that say GDPR, 21% that said AUP, 13% that said PHI, and 11% that said PII. What's interesting about these answers, as someone who's been through a number of these study groups, of course, is we rarely get a set of answers where there are no single digits. So we really are struggling with some of these abbreviations. We need to walk through what some of these might be. But if we go with the plurality of the answers, the highest number that we have here is 31% for FOSS. FOSS, of course, is free and open source software. That's what that happens to be. So as we are going through and looking at what may be available for us to use on our servers, free and open source is a very viable and extremely popular method of installing software. Probably because if we really get into it, this software and what we're doing with it is remarkable in its availability and its cost. Imagine having all of this software and it's free. If you go to professormesser.com, it's running on a FOSS-based web server, running a FOSS-based content management system, and a lot of the tools and the capabilities I use on that server are running free and open source software. Now, because of this, I have the ability to look at the source code and compile it myself, and oftentimes I do that on my servers. That way I know exactly the software I'm using. I can read through the source code to see what the software is doing. I can modify the source code that is running if I want to, and sometimes I have done that, and I have compiled a new version of that executable on my server with the changes that I made to it. You can't do that with commercial software. They don't give you the source code, and you can't compile it. So that's a good comparison if you're trying to figure out, do I go with commercial software or do I go with free and open source? There's a big difference there. There's other terms that you need to know. For example, an end-user license agreement. That wasn't part of our question we had here, but all of this comes from my exam or my set of videos, the 220.1102 4.6. The name of the video is Privacy, Licensing, and Policies. So that's where you would go to find those. In our example, the plurality of you got it absolutely right. 33% of you say that indeed it is free and open source software, or FOSS. There's no other way with any of these other options to compile that software on your own server. So that's what you would have chosen. The 23% of you said a GDPR. If you are in Europe, you know that the data protection regulations in the EU are very different than data protection in other parts of the world. And the general protection regulation that they have for your data in the EU falls under the GDPR. So in this case, we're not talking about keeping data private or the control of data. We're really talking about compiling software. So GDPR would not apply. An AUP, an acceptable use policy, is a set of rules and regulations that are often handed out to employees saying, here's your phone, here's your laptop, here's a tablet, here's your computer, here's the appropriate use of these technologies. Please only use them for these things. So they restrict you from using the hardware and software to do things outside of that acceptable use policy, or AUP. And in this case, we're talking about compiling software, not how we use the software, so AUP would not apply. 12% of you said a PHI, personal health information, or PII, the identifiable information. Both of those are similar to each other. Personally identifiable information would be things like your name, your address, your phone number, your email address, things that I can tie back to you. A more specific version of PII, you can think of it this way, might be PHI, which is healthcare information. So if you are working through trying to get health information sent from one doctor's office to another, that information has a certain set of protections associated with it, and those protections are summarized as PHI. So hopefully that helps you with one of those and how it works. Now, one of the questions we got, and this is a really useful question when you're going through the exam, and it really speaks to how you read through these. Richard in the chat room says, hey, just because FOSS is compiled on company servers, that doesn't necessarily mean it's FOSS, right? This is a very good question, because there is many different kinds of software that allows you to compile it, but that wasn't the question. The question says a company is using software that was compiled on company servers. Which of the following would describe this software? So you only have 5 choices. Could it be something outside of the 5 choices? It could be, but that wasn't the question. The question said, of the answers that are here listed on this screen, or of the following, which one of these would describe the software? And only one of these really applies. Now, what if there were different answers on here that could possibly be the answer? You might get a question that says, which of the following would be the best description of this software, which makes it an even harder question to answer, especially if there are multiple possibilities on the list of possible answers. So you have to now pick out, of the things that it could be, which one is really the best in this list. And in this case, the only one of these really matches software that can be compiled on company servers, because we went through all of the others. Answer here, the only one it could be, is free and open source software. Answer D. That is the correct answer. Daryl in IT in the chat room says, am I the best? Yes, you are. Daryl, you are the best. Glad we were able to get that one covered too. Let's go to another question. Let's see how we do on this one. Daryl says, yay, I agree. This next question asks, a technician working on a computer needs to know the Windows version and the amount of installed RAM. Which control panel utility would be the best way to provide this information? So already we're getting one of those harder questions, aren't we? I've already warned you about these, so now you know what to look for in these questions. The possible answers are programs and features, system, device manager, user accounts, or file explorer options. A technician working on a computer needs to know the Windows version and the amount of installed RAM. Which control panel utility would be the best way to provide this information? Would it be programs and features, system, device manager, user accounts, or file explorer options? File explorer options. Had a lot of people send me notes about the way I say file. It's a file. File explorer options is what we got here. Technician working on a computer needs to know the Windows version, the amount of installed RAM. So see if you know the answer. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Trad in the chat room says, thank you, Professor. Passed my 1001 and 1002 in October. Snuck it in there. Good job. fully from your videos and study guides. Congratulations on your new A+ cert. Now I'm lining up a help desk job for a healthcare provider. Congratulations. I think that's fantastic. And that's what you're supposed to do with these certifications. They are used so that you can go out and get a job or get a better job. Of course, it's not the only thing you should be doing. I talk a little bit about that in my video of how to get a job in IT with no experience, which is in the YouTube video description for this video. And it's a really important set of strategies you should be using to get that job or get that better job. Because it's not just any one thing, is it? It's not just certifications. It's not just a formal education. It's not just who you know. It's not just the labs you set up. It's a combination of all these things put together. And I explain my strategy behind that in that video. Again, that's in the YouTube video description of how to get a job in IT with no experience. Well, a number of you have locked in your answers on this one, so let's see how you did. The question asks, a technician working on a computer needs to know the Windows version and amount of installed RAM. Which control panel utility would be the best way to provide this information? Would it be Programs and Features, System, Device Manager, User Accounts, or File Explorer Options? Let's see how you answered. Really no question on this one. 90% of you, 90, have said System. It's System. We're not messing around on this one. We're all going answer B, System. Not all of us. 4% said Programs and Features. 4% said Device Manager. So a two-way tie for second place between those two. And that's pretty far back. The difference between 90 and 4 is pretty far back. 1% said File Explorer Options, and 0% said User Accounts. Not many people running to the User Accounts option for that particular piece of it. So 90% of you, 90, say it is System. Why would you say System? Oh, well, because that's where it is. If you go to the System page, there it is very plainly. It tells you exactly how your system is set up. The first thing on that page is the System option, and it shows you device specifications are right here. For example, we can see the name of this device, which is Daedalus. The processor, in this case, it is I believe it's a virtual machine I'm running here. So it's a virtualized version of the Intel Xeon. It is 8 gig of RAM. I guess I didn't put much RAM towards that VM, did I? But it's definitely 8 gigs already. I know how much RAM is in the system. Now, what about the version of the operating system? Well, if you look down here a little bit further, you can see that it is indeed a Windows 11 Pro version 2.1H2. So that's what happened to be there when I made this screenshot. So that is where you would find information about the operating system, the memory, and other specifications. There's a lot of great stuff there. So if you're troubleshooting a machine, you've never worked on this computer before, and you turn to the user and say, oh, well, how much memory is in the system? The answer you will get from the user is, how much what? Huh? I don't know. I don't know. How much? They don't know. And they shouldn't know. It's not their job to know how much memory is in the system. It's your job to know how much memory is in the system. So the next thing you do is you go to the Run option or head straight to the settings inside of Windows if you're running Windows 11. And under that settings window, you can choose the System option and view all of the details about how the system is configured. So you can know immediately, oh, well, that makes sense. I now know how much memory is in the system. I know which version of Windows is running. Now I can apply this knowledge that I've found in the system applet of the control panel or the settings. Now I can apply that information back to my troubleshooting tasks, and it makes it much easier to see what's there. You can also do other things from here. There's a performance option, so you can change virtual memory in the system. You can change how the system handles remote access. You can change and turn on and enable and disable system protections. There's a lot of things you can do from the system prompt. It's one you need to be very familiar with, and obviously you are. If 90% of you say it's System, you locked it in, you knew immediately what the answer was. Programs and Features is commonly used to add or remove applications or Windows features from your system. It does not tell you anything about what Windows version and amount of installed RAM. Device Manager might give you some of this information, but it really doesn't provide a very easy way to to tell you Windows versions or amount of installed RAM. So that's not what I would use. File Explorer doesn't tell you anything about the version of Windows that you're running or how much memory you have inside of the system. And User Accounts is great for resetting passwords and changing configuration settings for a user. But again, it doesn't tell you anything about the Windows version or how much memory. The only option here, not really the best way, but really the only way from these different options is indeed the system option. 90% of you chose system. And now everybody in the chat room is trying to figure out why this server is called Daedalus. Well, going to have to work through the rest of the videos in my series to figure that out. And we'll go from there, I think. Somebody else in the chat, I think, has already got the right answer. They already know the reference. It's right there. Remember, of course, that everything you find is not specific to anyone else's copyrighted. If there's any type of similarities, I'm sure it is a mere coincidence for what's in there and being able to work through it. Before we go to the next question, you've probably already noticed that there is a lot of different topics on this exam. It is extensive with the amount of content. Now, fortunately, it doesn't go very, very, very deep, but it does give you a lot that you need to know across a very broad scope. If you were to watch all of my videos for just A+, 137 videos, 19 hours of content for both my Core 1 and Core 2 courses. I couldn't make it any shorter. I cram it in there. I make sure I give you exactly what you need to know to pass this exam, but there's a lot of content here. So what I commonly tell people is if you can't go through all of these videos and you're trying just to figure out how you can get that information in an easier to read form, then you should probably have a look at my course notes, which contain all of the tables, all of the text, all of the important graphics from my videos are compiled into this single document. There's not only this physical version that I have in my hand where we print it out and we ship it to you, but there's also a digital version that you see on the screen now. This digital version has everything exactly the same as the physical version, and you can see there's a lot of good information in here. Let's skip forward a little bit and let's look at, for example, Linux commands. So here's all the Linux commands, the different commands you should know. You can't see it up here because my big head's in the way, but disk free, there it is. You can kind of see it on the screen there. Disk free is on the screen. All of the different Linux commands are there. Everything that's in my videos that's important for you to know for this exam is there. It doesn't replace you watching the videos. It doesn't replace you reading the books or doing the labs or working through the practice exams, but it's a great summary of information if you need that, especially if you don't have time to watch every single one of these different exams or exam videos. They are all there. And if you get the physical version, which I will ship to you, you get the digital copy that you can download immediately for free. So another good advantage. If you have the digital version and you would like to upgrade to the physical, I can send you a coupon for the difference and instructions on how to do that. Just open a ticket or send me a note from the Contact Us that is on my website. Those course notes may be able to help you, may be able to summarize everything for you. And in fact, Omega Supreme in the chat room says, just passed my 1101 test on Tuesday thanks to your study groups, course notes, and practice tests. Highly recommended. Thanks again, Professor. Now on to the 1102. And Omega, best of luck with the 1102 and congratulations for your 1101. And thank you so much for that $10 super chat. We sure appreciate it. Helps keep these lights on, helps keep the live streams coming, helps pay for that internet connection, and we sure appreciate it. Let's do another question. We have some time, so let's do that. This one, maybe this is another gimme, maybe it isn't. Let's see if it is. This next question asks, which of the following would be the best way to verify the integrity of a downloaded file? Would it be load the file into memory, use a password manager, install a browser extension, use an encrypted connection, or compare hashes? Which of the following would be the best way to verify the integrity of a downloaded file? Would it be to load the file into memory, use a password manager, install a browser extension, use an encrypted connection, or compare hashes? You think you know the answer? Follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You'll be able to figure out what you think the answer is, lock it in, and work through there. So a question in the chat room while we're doing that is an option that says I'm 801, 802 certified, but never renewed. So this is a version of the A+ certification. We are in the 1100 series. This would not be the 1000 series or the 900 series, but the 800 series, which, if you do the math, is about 9 to 10 years ago. So you got certified 10 years ago, but never renewed. And how do you find and apply remote jobs and pass the exams? How do you get back in the saddle again? And for the purposes of certification, if you really want to get a cert, obviously you didn't renew the one you had, you have to take the 2 exams again. There's no shortcuts there. So you have to go through maybe the videos, refresh yourself with the new content, and then you have to take both of those exams again, just as you did back in the 801, 802 days. So it's not unusual. Some folks are saying they want to get my audio courses for the 1102. And even though it says under the course option, there's text that says it includes 1002 course notes. So that sounds like a typo. So send me a note on that unhip word and let me know where you found that, what page it's on. I'll fix that. Obviously, if you're getting the 1102 audio course, it has the 1102 audio inside of it. So that's not an issue. You will absolutely get what you're looking for on all of those pieces. Let's see if we can see what this answer might be. The question is, again, which of the following would be the best way to verify the integrity of a downloaded file? Is it load the file into memory, use a password manager, install a browser extension, use an encrypted connection, or compare hashes? And 70%, 70, say compare hashes. 18% said use an encrypted connection. 7% said to install a browser extension. 4% said load the file into memory. And then 1% said use a password manager. So what would 71% is a pretty strong number to compare hashes to do this. And in fact, that's exactly what you should be doing if you have the option. Let's say you go to a website and they say, here's a file you can download. In fact, here's a good example of Ubuntu downloads that are available. And all I did was go out to the Ubuntu site and say, give me a list of all the files that you have for me to download. And it lists all the files. You can see the ISO files are right here to the right. That's the file name. But to the left is this very long SHA-256 hash. That's what that is. So you take that multi-gigabyte file, it goes through the file, and it creates a fingerprint. It creates a summarization, a stamp, a fingerprint, if you will, of everything that's in there, and it gives you the fingerprint. So what you would do is you would download that file to your computer, and on your side, on your computer, you would use a utility. I'm using a very simple one that's free from the Microsoft store called Hash Checker. But obviously, if you're in Linux, you probably have the capabilities already built in at the command prompt using OpenSSH. But here is the file. You can see it is Ubuntu 2110 Live Server AMD ISO, which is this first one. On their website, they say that the sum, the checksum, or in this case, the hash, is this very long number that starts with F8D3 and ends with Bravo 830. So I ran the same thing on my side. Actually, I ran the live server. The live server starts with E84F, ends in 92D4. And in fact, you can see my hash starts with E8DF and ends with 92D4. So it matches on both sides. You'd have to really look at the entire hash to make sure that it matches. But in this case, yeah, it does. In fact, this little utility allows you to paste in that entire checksum from the website, and it will compare both of them and tell you if it is correct. So that is a very good way to confirm that the file that you downloaded is exactly the same file as what is existing on that website. And that's a very good way to compare that. In the chat room, some folks are saying the operating system is automatically going to check these hashes, right? No, it does not. It doesn't do any hash checking to anything that you are downloading. You'll have to perform that hash checking yourself to be able to do that. Now, there are things you can do to confirm that the downloaded file does have integrity. In fact, if they had digitally signed these particular files and created an executable, a Windows executable from those, you can start the executable on your Windows system. And you may have seen this before, is that it says this executable says that it's signed by Microsoft.com. Do you want to run this file? And that's because there's a separate digital signature that's built into the executable. So in some ways, loading the file into memory could possibly be a way to check its integrity, but that's not a very good way to do it, especially if you're concerned about malware or other things being embedded into that document or file or executable. Loading into memory is probably not a very good idea. So and in fact, not all files have that digital signature capability, so that may not even provide you with any type of integrity check at all. So not a great option in this case for any of these. Certainly not the best way given the different options. Using a password manager doesn't really help you verify a file that you've downloaded. Installing a browser extension, what browser extension? That doesn't help either. Not really going to help you with checking the integrity of a particular file. And then lastly, using an encrypted connection will prevent someone else from seeing the information that you're downloading, but it won't help you check the integrity of the file once you have completed the download on your system. The only answer here that makes any sense is indeed answer E, that 71% of you chose to compare hashes. That is the right answer. That is one of the best ways to verify that integrity of a downloaded file. That's the one I would choose as well. That's the one you would choose as the correct answer on your system. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would like to tell you how you can qualify to receive an email that will give you credit for watching a 1-hour webinar category CEU. Now, if you don't know what a CEU is, this probably doesn't apply to you. A CEU is a continuing education unit. It is a part of a unit that you would use to renew, one way to renew your certification. It's not the only way to renew it, but some people do collect CEUs. And this would be a webinar category CEU. Here's how you would get the email from me. And you must follow these steps to receive the email. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. Click the link for Contact Us. That Contact Us link will take you to a form. In that form, put your name, put your email address. On the subject line, put something like the December 2022 Core 2 study group. That's close enough. Something around that so I know what study group it came to. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code word of the month, compare hashes. Compare hashes is the super secret code words of the month, I guess. Compare hashes. So once you've done that, you can also put any other text in that message that you would like to. I read through all of these. I'm not able to respond back to all of them, unfortunately, but I do read through every single one you send me. And in about a week or so, I go through these hashes, usually on the weekend. I go through the messages that say compare hashes, compare hashes, compare hashes. And if it's there, I will send you an email that is digitally signed that says, here is your 1 hour of a webinar category CEU. Now, technically, you can apply the CEU without my email. You don't have to have that. But I like sending the email just so you have some verification. So if CompTIA does show up and say, we'd like to audit your CEUs that you've submitted, you can say, oh, I got all these emails from Professor Messer saying I was there, so you can verify and you know that I was on those particular events and those CEUs are indeed valid. So that's why I go through that extra step, just so you would know how to do that when it finally happens. Let's do another one. Let's do another question that we might have. This next question, this might be something you've seen before. This question asks, a user has reported this message in their browser, quote, your connection is not private, end quote. Which of the following would provide more information about this error? Would it be performance monitor, startup messages, certificate details, application splash screen, or authentication logs? The question asks, a user has reported this message in their browser. Your connection is not private. Which of the following would provide more information about this error? Is it performance monitor, startup messages, certificate details, application splash screen, or authentication logs? If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You want to go to the link that is on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. We're going to pretend we're in the room. We're going to go through the process of figuring out the details, and we're going to lock in that answer without bothering anyone else. See if you happen to know what that one is, and we'll go through those pieces of it. Zach in the chat room while we're waiting asks, I'm currently using your YouTube course to study for my Security Plus. About halfway through. Do you cover all of the necessary acronyms throughout the 177 videos to pass? Yeah, well, yes, because I cover every single exam objective. Now, there are other acronyms. If you go to the exam objectives in the back pages, they just have page after page after page of acronyms. And quite honestly, the bulk of those, the vast majority of those are covered in the course. But sometimes they stick other acronyms back there. I don't know why, but they'll not show up on your exam. The only thing that shows up on your exam are the things that are in the exam objectives, the bulleted list of exam domains and subdomains in the exam objective section. And if you know that, if you go through those objectives, yeah, most of everything you need to know from an acronym perspective is listed in there. I don't think it's entirely necessary to go through the acronyms and do flashcards, for example, because quite honestly, CompTIA doesn't generally ask you those types of questions. They don't ask you, what does GDPR stand for? They're not going to ever ask you that piece of trivia. And quite honestly, once you start working in the industry, you're usually just talking acronyms anyway. Nobody ever talks broadly with the words that are associated with that. At one point in your career, you'll think, wait, what did that acronym mean again? I've already forgotten what the words are, but I know what the acronym is and I know what that refers to. So for those of you that went through your 1001 and you saw there's PCI and PCIe, but do we even ever talk about the peripheral component interconnect extended? What? I don't even know if that's right now that I say it out loud. That's how it gets with these acronyms. You now start mixing up the words, trying to figure. No, it's just PCI, PCIe. That's how it works. Whenever you work through that, and have those there. This is if you ever get into the details of the exams themselves, just stick to the objectives. Those domains and subdomains is exactly what you should be studying. If you study that, you're not going to have a problem. Everything will be exactly what you were hoping for and have it in there. So hopefully that will get you through the specifics of what you need to know. Let's see how you did with this question. The question asked, a user has reported this message in their browser, quote, "Your connection is not private," end quote. Which of the following would provide more information about this error? Is it performance monitor, startup messages, certificate details, application splash screen, or authentication logs? Let's see how you answered. 81% of you say it is certificate details. That is a strong answer. 16%, also nice double digits, say it's authentication logs. We also have 1%, 1%, and 1%, a three-way tie for third place with a single percent with performance monitor, startup messages, and application splash screen. Now, if you're not doing this in your browser already, you need to become accustomed to doing this. You will easily find plenty of places to do this, but I'll give you some ideas of where you can kind of practice some of these things. You've probably seen this pop up in your browser before where there is a message that says something relating to it's not private, your connection is not private, this connection does not have a valid certificate. There might be some other more detailed question. Or statement, those error messages are different depending on the browser that you're using. And one of the things you should do when you see one of those messages is you should look at the details for the certificate. You should click on the lock or whatever process your particular browser uses and look at what is listed in the certificate itself. Does the name of the server on the certificate match the name of the server you're connecting to? If it doesn't, you'll get an error message saying this connection is not private. Is the expiration date of the certificate before or after today's date? So if the certificate is expired, you may also get a message like this on your screen. And with all of these, especially when you deal with dates and times and checking for a valid date and time, make sure you check what your date and time is on this computer. If you've walked up to a computer and they say it just gives us this message, make sure you check the time and the date on that computer that's really up to date. Being able to check the certificate information is specific to the browser that you're using. So make sure you're familiar with that. In my browser, there's other options you can choose, and it's a different set of screens. Chrome is different than Safari, is different than Firefox, is different than Brave. There's a lot of different options depending on the browsers that you are using. Make sure you're familiar with looking at those, and make sure you become familiar with what's in that certificate. Not only going to help you for this A+ question, but it's also going to help you once you finally get all the way up to looking at something like Security Plus, where this becomes really important and understanding the details behind it. It's really remarkable how much information is hidden and embedded inside of that certificate. Really useful to have that there. In fact, look at the one at professormesser.com, and you'll notice, I think the cert that I have there is one specific to me. But it hasn't always been that way. So you can really find a lot of interesting information inside the cert that someone happens to be using for their web server. Hopefully that makes some sense. 81% of you think you don't need to make sense because we already knew the answer. You said certificate details, answer C, and that was absolutely correct. 15% said authentication logs. And there's no guarantee that your connection is not private is something that will appear in an authentication log because you may not even have authenticated at this point. There's nothing in the message that says you were logging in or authenticating or providing authentication details. It's just a message that popped up in the browser. So although it's certainly possible, depending on the authentication you're using, that maybe it might have something in the authentication logs, nothing about this error leads us to believe it's anything relating to authentication. So I would not choose that as a possible option. The other 1% that are here, performance monitor, doesn't tell us anything about a browser connection not being private, but it will tell you a lot about the performance of your system. What's the CPU, how much disk I/O, how much memory is in your system, how many applications are running. Certainly a lot of good details, but nothing about your browser connection. Startup messages, probably not going to be a good place to find your connection is not private because you've opened a browser, you've gone to a website, that's where this message appears. That's not something that commonly happens during startup. And 1% of you said an application splash screen. Well, maybe there's something there that would pop up, but I would think that we would see this message of your connection not being private well before you ever got to a point that an application would try to use that particular connection. That's the whole point of putting that error message there so that everything stops until you examine the certificate, you verify that either everything is okay or you confirm that indeed this is not the right certificate. Someone might be performing a man-in-the-middle attack. So that's a good idea of how we might want to change what we're connecting to or not continue any further with that particular browse that we have there. Now, if I look at this one we had before, I don't think I have. Did I put the URL there? I did. So if we go back to that screen, if you wanted to try this on your own browser on a site that's trusted but would still give you messages, I know that doesn't make sense, but this is what I used. Let's see if I can get scan. I can't move in on it. I've changed my browser, but that right there, if you can read it, says badssl.com. And guess what? That website has bad SSL on it. So when you go to that website, you'll get a big list of things to choose from. Since we're here, maybe I'll try this since we're right on this list. So if I go to bad SSL, let me show you. There it is. Here's badssl.com. This is what you get when you first connect to it. And it shows you all of these different things. An expired certificate, a wrong host certificate, a self-signed certificate, an untrusted root certificate, a revoked certificate. You have all these different options. So if you clicked expired, let's just click expired, it pops up a message for your browser. In my browser, it says this connection is not private. And it says This website may be impersonating expired.badssl.com to steal your personal and financial information. You should go back to the previous page. I want to show the details, and it says Safari shows this. You can view the certificate by clicking this link, and here is the certificate information. In fact, I'm going to click the trust, and you can already see that this certificate expired on Sunday, April the 12th at 2015 at about 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So that's where we're getting this message that indeed this badssl.com certificate is expired. Now, that itself is a message that gives us an idea of something is not right here. And although a certificate simply being expired doesn't necessarily change the security of the system, a certificate that's been around for a while is certainly one we would be concerned about. These days, we expect people to update their certificates about every month or two. So that's the important part of this in making that happen. So maybe that's something that you're familiar with and working through. Those are things that can be really valuable if you're trying to break down where these problems might be. And if you want to be more accustomed to how your browser reacts to these types of problems, go visit badssl.com and you can do that as well. Now, I know that we're now past an hour, but I want to do one more question for you that we've got in our list. This question that I have is one that, I'll be honest, I did not write this weekend. This is a question that comes directly from my practice exams. You may not even realize that I have written a book that has 3 90-question practice exams inside of it. It has performance-based questions. It has multiple choice-based questions. It is all in my practice exams book that is available in a physical edition that I'm holding and a digital edition that I have on my screen here. In fact, this is not here. Here. This is the book right here. So we can see all these questions that I have written. In fact, let's go through one. This happens to be A11 right out of the book. And this question asks, and again, no answering in the chat room, same rules apply. A user is attempting to airdrop a document to an associate, but they do not see any destination devices in their list of available airdrop locations. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Is it a low battery, rotation lock is enabled, low storage space, or Wi-Fi and Bluetooth are disabled? So you can look at those questions. Now, this is a PDF, and if your PDF supports annotation, you can grab the pen that you use for your tablet or use your mouse. Maybe you can mark different options on the screen. If you think the answer is B, you can simply mark it and come back to it later. I like to do these one at a time. So one of the things that I put into this book, it tells you if you just want the answer, A, B, C, or D, go to page 33. It's sort of a make-your-own story type scenario. Or the details, you go to page 47. Now, you could just scroll up to page 47, then scroll back to the original question, but this is a PDF. So I built into this link. So if you click where it says the details, it takes you all the way to page 47 without having to scroll. And in fact, there's our question at the top, and it tells you the answer is D, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth are disabled. And I explain with some level of detail why that particular answer was the right answer. In fact, the Apple iOS and iPad devices use Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to provide location and transfer functionality for AirDrop. Both wireless options should be enabled to use the AirDrop feature. Now, of course, I never get these right. I always get the answer wrong. So telling me why answer D was right doesn't help me. So what I've done in this book for every single question is I tell you what the incorrect answers are, and I tell you why these are the incorrect answers, and I break down for you why was it not low battery? Why was rotation lock enabled not the right answer? Why was low storage space not the right answer? And you can read through what all those happen to be. Now, if you're reading this and you're thinking, but wait, I don't even know what AirDrop is. I have no idea what you're talking about. At the very bottom of this detailed list, I tell you the objective this came from and the name of the video that it came from. And I even give you a link that you can either click on or you can use the QR code right now to go directly to the video so that you can get more context as to what I happen to be asking in the first place. And once you're done doing that, if you'd like to go to the next question, there is a back option in my browser. I give you the quick keys in the introduction to this book. So whether you're on Windows or Mac OS, there's probably a back option in your PDF reader, and you can go right back to where we started, and you can go to the next question that's in the list. All of this is in my practice exams books. I have one for both Core 1 and Core 2. You can find it on my website at professormesser.com/core2pe, or simply follow the links that are at the top of the page. I have pull down menus that will take you right to the pages for these practice exams. And again, you can either get a digital edition or the physical edition to pull from. Both of those would be good ways to, and you can see it's big, to learn what you need to know for this exam. I try to give you as much Q&A as possible. It's one of the tenets, one of the foundational pieces of any study is to have plenty of great questions to go through. I am the one I have written these questions. These aren't questions from someone else. I wrote every single question that's in this book. I wrote all the answers. Everything in here is what I've written. So you know the questions you're getting are have the same style, a same flavor, a same voice as the questions that you might see on the exam. That's another good way to help support the site as well with those practice exams books. Have a look at those. They may be able to help you for your exam. One thing that you can do for free, and I've mentioned it 99,000 times already, is to get the objectives. Go to professormesser.com/objectives to find a link over to the CompTIA website, or you can download them for free by going to your favorite search engine and simply typing in CompTIA exam objectives, and you'll be able to find all of those objectives. That should be the first thing you read through before you start your studies. It should be the last thing you use before you walk into your exam, because it makes a great checklist. People ask me all the time, how do I know if I'm ready to take my exam? Well, you grab the objectives, you go through every bullet. If you can check mark every single bullet, you're ready to take your exam. And by the way, if you check mark every single bullet in these exam objectives, you're going to pass this exam. That's how valid, how to the point, how specific this set of objectives is. They practically give you everything you need to know on a platter. You're just going to need to spend the time to memorize everything and remember what it has as part of these objectives, and that's absolutely doable. That's what we do on this site. We can help you through that as well. Go to professormesser.com/objectives. We do a lot here every month. We've got these 2A+ study groups that we've done this week. We have a Network Plus study group next week. We have a Security Plus study group after that. And of course, we're going to do the same thing in in January. When the new year starts, we've got 2A+ study groups, the Core 1 study group on January the 3rd. So you'll certainly be out of detox by then, right? After the new year, I would hope so. And then by the 5th, we do the Core 2 study group next time in January. Plenty, and of course, all new questions. I write all new questions for every single one of these. Have a look at what's there at professormesser.com/calendar. You'll know exactly when the next live event is going to be. Well, stick around. We're not done. I've got plenty more questions, but this time you're going to ask the questions to be able to do that. I'll answer your questions live here on the live stream. We'll talk more about that in the after show right after this. Don't forget about the course notes and practice exams are on my website. You can find more about that at professormesser.com/1102success. We've also got my vouchers already discounted and my free exam hacks ebook if you're in the US or Canada. Go to professormesser.com/vouchers. Do not pay full price for the vouchers that you're going to use on your exam. And don't forget to join us when we're not here. We have our daily pop quiz questions for A+ out on professormesser.com/Twitter and /Instagram. We also have our Discord, where I'll be immediately after this live stream at professormesser.com/Discord. And of course, we're here on YouTube. If you like this video, we would love it if you would give a thumbs up. Every single YouTube person you've ever seen always says that. And that's because that's what YouTube looks at when they look at our account to see, do people really like what you're doing? Is this something that's valid? Should we keep you on the platform? And that's what they do. So be sure to give it a thumbs up. We'd love it if you subscribe to the channel as well. It's a great way to keep up with what we are doing here. Well, stick around. We've got plenty more questions to go through. I've got a lot of details to look at in the after show. Thanks for being here for the live stream so far. Stick around for the after show. We'll see you next time on the A+ study group. Okay, let's now shift gears over to the live stream. I need to get a few things on my screen. And then we'll answer any question you have. If you're watching this video on my website, you'll notice there is a chat that is on my website. That is the chat that I'm looking at. It happens to be the same as the YouTube chat. So if you're on YouTube right now and watching the chat, it's the same chat. So that makes it very, very easy for me to have a look at that. So we'll have to look at the details and see what options or questions you might have as we step through all of these. There's a lot that we can go through, a number of questions. I'm going to scroll up just a little bit so we can answer some of these and be able to understand what the different things might be available, what your questions might be, what the topics might be, and some of the things you're running into. We'll start with sort of a callback to previously. Well, you're very welcome for the platform. Happy to have it for you. Matt asks, how does this, I'm assuming the 220.1101 and 220.1102, compared to the 220.1001? Well, as I mentioned earlier in the live stream, the previous versions of the exams were the 220.1001 and 220.1002. Those two exams were retired in October. You can't take those exams anymore, at least not the English language version of those exams. They are only available in other languages, I think, until the end of the year or somewhere in there. They decide when that's all going to be to make some of that happen. That comparison it varies depending on the exam. Generally, what happens is they get rid of some information and they add some new information to the newest versions. So if you are studying right now for your exam, please do not study from materials that say 220.1001 or 220.1002. You do not want to do that. You want to study from materials that are specifically written for the 220.1101 or 220.1102, because that version of the exam has about 30 to 40% new content, which isn't a lot in the big picture of things, but it's enough that you could fail your exam if you don't study the right thing. So that's why I highly recommend you do that, is go look at the 1101 and 1102 and make sure all of your materials say 1101 or 1102. Have those in there. Let's find another question you might have. This is a very common question that well, first we'll answer this one, then I'm going to go to the kind of a broader question. Vendrea says, will Linux simulations be on the exam? They certainly could be, because Linux and the commands for Linux are certainly part of the exam. I would say the performance-based question that I did at the very beginning of the study group, which popped you down at a Linux command prompt and said, perform this function. I think that's a pretty good representation of a style of simulation that you could get as part of the performance-based questions. Of course, the performance-based questions can take many different forms. It could be a drag and drop. It can be a fill in the blank. It could be a matching question. It could be one where you're putting things in a particular order from highest to lowest, fastest to slowest, something like that. It doesn't have to be a simulation. I hear a lot of people say, I got to prepare for the simulations. You might not get any simulations, or you might. Kind of depends on what they're planning to do on this exam. So yes, anything that's in the exam objectives could potentially appear on the exam, either as a multiple choice based question or a performance based question. You need to be ready for anything. Another question asks, if I want to get into the cybersecurity world, do I need to do the A+ certifications? I'm based in the UK. This sort of applies across the board to everybody who is working on these exams. Cybersecurity, the term itself doesn't really mean anything. It's more of a marketing term we came up with to mean anything security related, which in the scheme of or perspective of IT is a little broad. There are cybersecurity jobs for programmers. There are cybersecurity jobs for QA, quality assurance. It's not really IT. It's really on the computer science side. There are cybersecurity jobs on the IT side, which is why you'll often hear me refer to them as IT security jobs, just so you understand the scope of what I'm talking about. So let's talk about IT security jobs. I've spent a lot of time as a systems engineer going from company to company to company and talking to their IT security teams. Most of what I was talking to them about related to firewalls and security technologies are surrounding that firewall, but it is a type of technology that's really more of a higher level. You have to have a very solid foundation in operating systems and networking to even think of getting an IT security position of any note. And so I highly, highly recommend that you look to see what a number of hiring managers are looking for. Some hiring managers may be looking for someone who has a Security Plus certification, but you might also want to check to see what operating system experience are they expecting me to have? What networking experience are they expecting me to have? And that's a foundational set of knowledge that you really need if you're planning to manage firewalls, configure firewall rules, configure different ways of authentication into your system, provide multi-factor authentication, set up IPsec tunnels, set up SSL client-side VPNs, set up all of these different security technologies within your organization. It's not something you commonly expect someone fresh out of school to jump into and be able to have the knowledge or context to be able to properly address those challenges. So although A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus are all very good prerequisites for what may potentially be an IT security position, you still need a lot of experience on the operating system side and plenty of experience on the networking side to be able to bring those technologies and knowledge bases to a job that deals with IT security. But you have to start somewhere. I started on the operating system side. I moved into networking. I moved into protocol analysis. That moved me into security and eventually into a systems engineer position, working specifically with security technologies and next generation firewalls. It is a long path. It's a long curve. There's a long story that has to take place. This is not something you can do in a year, probably not in 2 years, but the things you learn along the way are valuable for the rest of your career. Operating systems and networks pay very, very well. So you're not losing anything by knowing those technologies. And by the time you get to the security side, now you're ready for that next level up in your career. And that's really what happens. Let's see another question that might come through. I'm sort of doing these ad hoc as we go. So I'm sort of reading along and working through those. Is there a standardized A+ textbook that I can buy to prepare for the exam? CompTIA does have a standard textbook. It's one, if you think back to some study groups I did a very long time ago, a number of years ago, one of the best textbooks I found was one that was written by an organization called GTS Learning. And the people there were just spot on. The books are written with sort of the same mindset I have. They tell you exactly what you need to know to be able to understand these technologies and pass the exam. And I love their books. But GTS Learning was acquired by CompTIA a number of years ago. And so you can't get those books from GTS Learning anymore. But fortunately, they kept the GTS Learning people. So now their books are written by those same GTS Learning folks. They're just now CompTIA folks. And I like their books. If you go to my website under the pull-down menus, I have a section for exam recommendations, study recommendations, and those A+ books are in my study recommendations. There's lots of great books out there, though. You don't have to go with the CompTIA ones. You can always go out to Amazon, read through a chapter or two, find a book that you think fits your style, and see what other people are saying about it, and you can purchase one of those books that's just as valid as doing that as well. So I think that's really good to be able to focus on those. There are a number of questions in here about, is this in the exam? Is that in the exam? Are these other things in the exam? The best way to know whether something is going to be in the exam or not is to go to the exam objectives. We haven't even really brought up the exam objectives yet, but I think since we've talked about it so much, it might not be a bad idea to bring up the A+ exam objectives. Let's do the 1102 exam objectives, just so you can really appreciate everything that happens to be in there. This is the 1102 exam objectives. Let's zoom up a little bit so we can kind of see what's in here. These objectives, they give you a breakdown of operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. let's keep going, because here's where we start with these objectives. Let me turn it into a scroll here. Here's where we start with these objectives is in domain 1.0, which is operating systems. The subdomain 1.1 says you need to identify basic features of Microsoft Windows editions. Well, what does that mean? Fortunately, they tell you. For Windows 10 editions, notice they spell out which version of Windows you need to know about. You need to know about Home, Pro, Pro for Workstations, and Enterprise. Are there other Windows 10 editions out there? Yes, there are. Are they in the exam objectives? No, they are not. Therefore, you don't need to know them. Notice that also Windows 11 editions are not in here. It specifically says Windows 10, and there is a section up here that says, note on Windows 11. You know, versions of Windows that are not end of mainstream support up to and including Windows 11 are intended content areas of the certification. But notice it says, as such, objectives in which a specific version of Windows is not indicated can include content related to both, which means that if they are spelling out a specific version like Windows 10, then they really do mean just Windows 10. Feature differences, you need to know the differences between domain access versus workgroup, desktop styles, user interface, availability of remote desktop, random access memory support limitations, BitLocker, gpedit.msc, and then upgrade paths. Well, those are the 2 or 3 or 4 videos right there at the very beginning of my course dealing with that section or subsection 1.1. That's the value of those exam objectives, is they tell you exactly what you need to know. And so that's my answer to everybody asking, is this on the exam? Is that on the exam? Is this on the exam? Hey, I didn't see this in your videos, and yet another third-party tool mentioned this. Well, it doesn't matter what's in my videos, and it doesn't matter what a third party says. The only thing that matters is those exam objectives. So that's where I would recommend you go look, and you'll notice that all of my videos are written specifically to and follow the same structure as those exam objectives for that very reason. You should always be very wary if you are working with a set of study materials that is asking you questions that have nothing to do with the exam objectives. I don't know why third parties do this. I don't know why people are using those materials. They have nothing to do with the exam, and it's an important part of your studies is to know exactly what's going to be on that exam. Speaking of exams, we have, hey, Professor wanted to stop by and say thank you. With your study guide, I was able to pass my Security Plus exam. Congratulations on your Security Plus certification. That is a tough exam. It's bigger, much bigger than A+ and Network Plus. It's a tough one to have to study with, and congratulations on that. That's always good news when somebody says, yep, I was able to pass it. We were able to take it down and get that one done. Now you're certified for 3 years. Congratulations. Let's get... this one sort of builds on some of the things we've talked about earlier. Hello, Professor. What jobs do you recommend after earning the A+ and even combine with a bachelor's degree? This is a good combo, by the way. If you can combine a formal education with certifications that you have, those are 2 very good elements to bring to the table when you're trying to interview. We'll go back to that video I mentioned earlier, how to get a job in IT with no experience. It's in the YouTube video description of this video. I recommend not just those 2 things, formal education, industry certifications. I also mention doing some labs or getting some practical experience. And that's practical, may not be professional experience, but practical experience, certainly. And then the last one, a lot of people don't think about that. 4th thing is knowing somebody who already works there. If you're not networking today in your particular local area, you should be going to Microsoft user groups, Cisco user groups, and getting to know the people that are there, because those are the people that are hiring for these jobs. It's always good to know that before you walk in the door of an interview and you say, hey, look, last time I saw you was at the user group meeting last month. Those are great situations to be in. And commonly, people who work for an organization, even if they're not the hiring manager, will ask you for your resume because they can give you that to the HR department and get credit for you being hired, which means they get a finder's fee and you get a bonus. Well, I guess your bonus is your job. So very often you'll find these people, oh, you don't have a job yet? Send me your resume. I'll hand it off to HR. And if you're hired, not only do you know me and I can say, yes, I know this person from the user group, but I'll also get a little bonus in my paycheck too. So it's sometimes a good win-win for everybody. Very good idea. That's always something to think about, and that's a good combo, a good 1-2 punch. Let's see what other options we have here. So let's see if I can find other questions that are coming in. When do you do these study groups for Security Plus? Well, it will be 2 weeks from yesterday. So you can always find when the next study group is going to be by going to my calendar. It's at professormesser.com/calendar. And if you're in our Discord already, you'll notice there is an events section, an events channel in the Discord. And that events channel is always updated as well. So you know exactly when the next event is going to be. So if you're watching this video and it's months later, we're now halfway into 2023. Obviously, none of the dates I mentioned here will apply to what we're doing next. Just come to my website, look at professormesser.com/calendar. It'll tell you exactly when the next live event is going to be. Let's see. Hi, Prof. Do you think going CompTIA A+ into CompTIA networking is a good start into networking? Would you recommend going into CCNA after this? Well, I think if you go to Network Plus, which is a very good introductory certification, it sets you up for doing higher level certifications in networking. A good example of a higher level networking cert is the Cisco Certified Network Administrator, or CCNA. I think that's a good one to look at if you know you're interested in managing switches, routers, configuring networks, troubleshooting networks, doing protocol analysis, securing networks, or anything to do with any of this connectivity. Then you'll want to go into networking. Some people will often say on the internet, sometimes rightly, sometimes wrongly, just skip over Network Plus, go straight to CCNA. That's not always the best advice, however. You should look to see what jobs you're applying for, which jobs you qualify for, and see what those managers are asking for. Now, if in the job posting they say, we're looking for somebody with a Network Plus, showing up with a CCNA probably is not your best bet, because they're obviously looking for entry level and not intermediate level. And that's one of the things you have to really watch for. I think people don't appreciate or even understand how important it is for you to match the job posting. Match it as closely as you can. You don't want to go too far over that job posting description, because it's very, very possible you could overqualify yourself, which is a real thing. You may be thinking to yourself, but wait, wouldn't you want somebody in this position who is as knowledgeable as they could possibly be about everything relating to a network? And the answer obviously is no. Not a chance. If I want somebody with a Network Plus level of knowledge, I might be putting them into a network operations center. They might be taking first level calls at that network operations center. If I put somebody with a CCNA into an entry level NOC type environment, I might be, as a hiring manager, very concerned that they're going to get really bored really quickly. Or maybe this is just something they can get a paycheck for now, but as soon as they find a job where somebody wants their CCNA, they're going to leave us and go to that company. So it's, from a hiring manager's perspective, not a good bet. And that's why I tell people, don't use Network Plus and CCNA as interchangeable Legos. They are not. They're very, very different in their scope. They're very, very different in how they are used, and obviously very, very different in the content that you will learn for those certifications. If you know you're getting into networking, though, maybe CCNA is the right first step if you know there's a job out there where they're wanting that particular credential. And in that case, you could skip over Network Plus, but you're going to have to learn all that Network Plus content that you skipped over as part of your CCNA. So this CCNA may take you a little bit longer to finally get to that point, because you'll have to study a little bit more. You have to study all the things you didn't get because you skipped over the Network Plus. Other questions. Let's step through the other questions that might be here. Let's see what other options. Here we go. So, hey, Professor, I'm trying to get a cybersecurity analyst job to break into the field. I have my Security Plus. I'm enrolled in a master's program in cybersecurity. How can I prep for the CEH? Well, the first thing you should do if you're studying for the CEH is to get a very good monitoring system for your private information. CEH, they've not done a great job in the past of protecting your private details. And that's one of the reasons why I never recommend the CEH, is because they've had a few administrative problems at keeping things private. In fact, with the CEH, you have to prove who you are. So you give them a copy of your driver's license, a copy of your passport. Well, unfortunately, CEH has been hacked in the past multiple times, and that information, at least in one of those situations, has gotten out. So I'm never going to take the CEH, because I'm never going to provide them with any information that they could then mismanage, allegedly, and have that information suddenly appear on the internet. So I can't in any form recommend that particular certification. There's plenty of great security certifications in the industry, and I realize some jobs are asking specifically for the CEH, so that would be one where you just have to make your own decisions about that one. And as far as prep, CEH also is very particular about who teaches their materials. They don't let just anyone teach their content. They feel that it is private information, it's proprietary, and not allowed. Another reason why I'm not interested in working through any dealings with them on that one either. So that's the way it works. How you prep for CEH, I have no idea, because I don't recommend it, follow it, or ask about it. Not something I do. I was just talking about the GTS Learning. GTS Learning doesn't exist anymore. They were purchased by CompTIA. So the books from CompTIA that are on my site are the CompTIA books. They are the ones that are most updated with the latest things. If it's a book that is for the 2201101 or 2201102, then it's for the latest version of the exams. How does one get practical experience? I'm glad you asked, Rena, because if you watch my video on how to get a job in IT with no experience, that's where that comes from, the practical experience part. I give you some examples so far of things you can do in your lab at home that can really, really help you if you're interested in learning more about this. So I would highly recommend you have a look at that video of getting practical experience. I think that's something that might help you too, as you are trying to figure out, well, what do I do? What do I set up at home? Do I do Active Directory? Do I set up a firewall? What do I do? Well, I give you 3 or 4 examples in that video of things that can be really, really useful. So I would recommend that. A good comparison, although it's difficult to compare these, but we'll take this question. Thanks for your answers so far, PM. How does Network Plus compare in size to both modules of A Plus combined? Is 4 months from start to finish realistic? Well, fortunately, Network Plus itself is smaller in the number of topics you would need to know than combining both A Plus exams together. I mentioned earlier that 2 to 3 months per exam is probably about right, and 2 to 3 months is probably about right for Network Plus as well. So for A Plus, you're spending 4 to 6 months for A Plus, 4 to 6 months for Network Plus, 2 to 3 months is probably the average. Now, if you already have knowledge in networking, you already have some familiarity with networking, you can absolutely speed that up a little bit. But I think the average for most people is about 2 to 3 months. Everybody studies at a different pace. Everybody has a different amount of time every day they have available to study. Everybody has a different set of things going on in their life. So it's difficult to say exactly how much time. But if you start with the objectives, you take the first section, you study that first section, and you say, well, I was able to do that in a day. Other people may say, I got through it in a week. All right, well, from there, we can start extrapolating out how long it would take for the entire set of exam objectives. And I think that's probably the best way that most people should do it. Do it as your relative perspective, how long it takes you to be able to go through these objectives. It doesn't really matter what other people do. It's about you learning every single one of those bullets directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. So let's take, I have a personal knowledge of this one, so let's step through this one. Could please advise me with the right steps in which I should follow to be a professional salesperson in a cybersecurity services field? Well, if you're working, let me give you first the approach that I have as someone who was a senior systems engineer with both McAfee, at the time it was called Network Associates, and with Palo Alto Networks, which I spent the last 7 years of my professional career. I guess I could still say I still have a professional career, right? But the last systems engineering position I had was 7 years at Palo Alto Networks. And so I worked very closely with a single salesperson, and we would go from company to company to company and ask them, would you like a new firewall? They go, yeah, this one doesn't do what we wanted to do. Does yours do this? Yes, it does. Here's how it does it. How many of these would you like? And then we go to the next company. So those are sort of the basic job function of a systems engineer and salesperson in cybersecurity. Is you're simply demonstrating your wares. You're asking people what their challenges are, what they have now. Is it working or not working the way they would like? Are there certain features they would like to have? And then they tell you, and then you say, well, we have something that does exactly that. And then you can explain how this product does that and then sell them that product. From a technical perspective, it was a lot of fun because there were always different requirements from the customers, and you're the one who has to put together the plan or the design of how this would work in their environment. Now, that's on the systems engineering, the technical side of things. If you're talking about the salesperson side of things, the salesperson doesn't have to know how the firewall works, but they need to understand kind of a high-level view of all of the functions of that device. What can it do to help the customer? Well, we can stop malware at the firewall. We can recognize applications going across the network and allow or disallow certain applications to work or certain features of an application to work. And so we have an SSL, an end-user SSL that we can provide. So if you need people remotely to be able to access things on the internal network, it's built into the firewall. So there are all these features and benefits that you as a salesperson would need to know. And you need to be somewhat familiar with this security environment and the security world in general. Most of your skills as a salesperson, though, are on the sales side. You don't have to worry about certificates and getting a Security Plus. You don't have to worry about knowing the details of hashing versus encryption. That's not your concern. From a salesperson, you have to understand what's the customer need, what is their budget like, what is the process they go through for purchasing, are there people that we need to bring into the process now so that they're ready whenever you want to get a purchase order, is there a discount that they're going to need to fit into their budget. So there's a lot of salesy type things that you would need to know. And there are plenty of books and plenty of tools out there on how to sell. You've probably heard and seen things in the movies, and this is kind of a real thing, where they hand you a pen and say, sell this pen to me, which is a little bit trite and a little bit demeaning, but you can make it fun. And you can, of course, tell people, let's talk about firewalls and how I might sell a firewall to you and not a pen, because that's after all what someone is doing. This is probably why I never ended up being a salesperson, because I wouldn't put up with a lot of the nonsense that they would ask of the salespeople. I was happier solving problems. And I think people who are technical, they're in IT, they're a systems engineer, there's somebody on the technical side, we love to solve problems. We love to see something not working and we love to make it work. Or we have a challenge in designing a system. It's always fun to find a way to meet that challenge and to have that design do what a customer wants it to do. So very different types of things. And effectively, if you become very good at the foundations of selling, then you can very easily move that into any type of selling, specifically cybersecurity indeed. It always helps to have some base knowledge of the technologies, though. Other things that people are asking, we'll touch on this one real quick to see what we can do with it. Hey, Prof, any tips for international users on landing a remote job? Most require you to be U.S.-based. A few still need you to be physically in the U.S., even though it's a full remote job. A lot of those requirements for remote jobs and where you are as a country, and in some cases your state inside of the United States, is based on the rules and regulations either from the federal government or state government, especially as it is involved with payment and taxes. It's not a simple thing to negotiate international law, especially when it comes to hiring. Take, for example, in the EU and the UK, even to some degree, a lot of positions that you would take have a contract associated with them where everything related to what you can and cannot do in that job is clearly defined as part of that contract, regardless of where you work. If you are a barista, if you are in fixing cars, if you're an air conditioner tech, if you're in IT, all of those things have some type of contract associated with them in those countries. And it also dictates how much time off you get during the year, how you are paid, and it also details how you leave a position, how much time and notice you're able to give, and it allows you how you could be fired. It details that process, and usually it's a very formal process. In the U.S., very different set of laws. Most of the states in the U.S., they can hire you and fire you for any particular reason. There's no contracts. There's very rarely a contract, in fact, in the United States. And so it's a very different job environment. Once you step outside or have positions with people outside the United States, the taxing is different. The rules at the federal government level are different. You may be required to have a contract with that person. And for U.S. companies, they're not accustomed to doing that. In some cases, aren't interested in doing that, which is why you see a number of them say, no, you got to be in the U.S. to be able to take this particular position. It's a bit of a challenge. I would recommend if you are outside the U.S. and you want to work for a U.S. company, I've worked for many U.S. companies that hired people all over the world. Palo Alto Networks was a good example of one. Find one of those really big companies that needs people in different parts of the world. We had great tech support people in Europe. We had great tech support people in Asia Pacific, and that would just follow the sun. And so we would hire people in those parts of the world to be able to handle those particular tasks. Generally, you just have to go to the big companies for that. And that's what I would recommend you do as well, is talk to the big companies about what they can offer you for positions, even though you may not be may not be physically located in the U.S. and they might be headquartered in the U.S. They might still have lots of international jobs available. And if they don't, they're probably going to tell you, as you mentioned, as part of the job description, nope, don't have a job for you. Just keep it moving. Find the ones where it fits. Go to those big companies and you'd be in really good shape. There's Puerto Rico. Hola, ¿cómo está? We are, how many years have been teaching CompTIA? Thank you for all you do. Oh, gosh, how many years at this point? About 15, maybe closer to 20. I guess it depends on how you count. How do we count? Because I spent a lot of time as a systems engineer going all over Puerto Rico, going to San Juan, going to Caguas, going to all of these different places on the island, going up and down the East Coast, traveling internationally. And those were as a systems engineer. And then I moved and shifted into the CompTIA side probably 10 to 15 years. So the first A+ course I did, so this is a good way to track it, is the 601 and 602 series. So I did the 601, 602, 700 series, 800 series, 900 series, 1,000 series. This is the 6th series, if I count my fingers properly, the 6th series of A+ that I've done. Each one of those 3 years. So you do 3 times 6, about 15 to 18 years. Not quite 18 because we're still in the first few months of that 6th series. So we'll say 15. I think that's probably about right. So I got it at this point. I think we've got a process now, and we know exactly how these things are supposed to work. So that's how that works. Other questions. Let's keep going into this list at other things that you are asking about. So I mentioned earlier that it's challenging to find an entry-level position that has anything to do with IT security, but there are some out there. And this question from Joseph asks, what is a realistic entry-level position to apply for with a bachelor's in cybersecurity and a handful of certs? I think first, you should probably recognize that even though you now have a bachelor's degree in cybersecurity, that there are very few entry-level positions in cybersecurity. So there's already a misconnection there, I think, between what the universities are willing to teach you versus what's available on the market. However, the knowledge you have in cybersecurity is going to be very valuable to you. So don't think that that's a wasted time, because it absolutely is not. If anything, it positions you well for practically any entry-level position in IT. And let me tell you that a lot of you are studying cybersecurity and cloud, and you're hoping to get an entry-level position in cybersecurity or cloud. And what you're going to find is there's not a lot relative to all of the other general entry-level positions in IT. And my recommendation to you, and I can't stress this strongly enough, is go get any job you can in IT. I don't care where it is. I don't care what it's doing. In most cases, it's probably going to be a entry-level help desk position, entry-level field service technician, which is what I did, entry-level. And you may be thinking, well, I spent all this time getting a cybersecurity degree and I'm not doing anything with it. And it feels that way. It absolutely feels that way, but you're wrong. You are doing something with it. You are leveraging all of this time you spent learning technologies to get your foot in the door. And let me tell you, once you get in the door of IT, now you don't have to worry about what your degree was in. Now you don't have to worry about, do I have everything I need to be able to get a job in this industry? Because now you have one. At that point, all of your subsequent jobs will be asking you about the experience in the jobs that you've already had in IT. And that's where I mentioned in earlier study groups, you're going to level up. So I got a help desk job. I stay there 6 months, a year, that's probably about right. And now I level up into doing operating system management, desktop management, server management, Active Directory, whatever it happens to be. And then maybe from there, you level up into doing networking. I'm sort of making this up as you go. Your path is going to be different, but this is an example. So now we level up into networking. Now we learn about switches and routers and wide area networks and local area networks and fiber optics and copper and everything else around that. And after a few years in that, now we level up again, and a good place to level up might be IT security. So although there's not a lot of entry-level positions in security, get your foot in the door. I can't stress this enough. Go get the job. Don't dismiss a position because you studied cybersecurity, but it's an entry-level help desk position. It's okay. You will get there. And it's more valuable you have a job in the industry now than trying to find some niche position that you can move into. Now, to answer your question, though, is that there are some entry-level positions in networking and security out there. And if you are in a very large geography or you work or are interviewing with a company that's relatively large, I would highly recommend you look to see if there are SOC positions available, a Security Operations Center or a SOC. These Security Operations Centers have all kinds of people working for them. They have entry-level security, which is sort of an entry-level security help desk, to be quite honest, because they know you haven't worked and done any of this yet. But in that position, now you get to be a sponge. Now you get to watch everything going on. You get to know who's doing what. You get to know what they're doing. Maybe you can look over their shoulders. They're fixing a problem. You kind of start getting a feel for the industry, the terms that we use, the abbreviations, all of those things that you've heard in the courses but never had a chance to use. Now you start to use them. There's not a lot of jobs like that out there, but there are some. And you may find yourself stumbling into one that would then position you to move up within that same organization or move to other organizations and have more of a security focus than otherwise you might not have had. So hopefully that gives you a perspective. It's challenging to get an entry-level cybersecurity, but very easy, relatively speaking, to get one that is an entry-level IT. And go get that entry-level job, whatever it happens to be. Get in the door. Get your foot in the door right now, and don't worry about the rest. So what platform would I suggest to simulate a network for practice? You don't, for the Network Plus, you don't really need to simulate a network for practice. A lot of the things you'll probably end up doing for Network Plus are popping open a command prompt, running a ping, running a trace route. And if you follow exactly what I do in the videos, you'll get a feel for how to do that in your operating system you're using right now. And most of those commands work in practically any operating system that you're going to use. So that's one easy way. A lot of people, though, would like to go a little bit further beyond that. They would like to be able to do more with working with networks. Maybe you start working with networks and you think, this is cool. What if we set up a switch and a router and we have systems on the end and we could ping all the way through? How do you do that? And if you're one of those people, I would recommend that you go out to Cisco's website and get a copy of Packet Tracer. Packet Tracer is the Cisco product. It's got a very steep learning curve relative to other things you may have used, but it allows you to build out your own networks, sort of drag and drop and put a switch on the screen, drag and drop and put a router on the screen, configure it with an IP address, configure the interfaces on these devices. And there's plenty of labs on the internet to kind of help you through learning more about how this works. But it is a great virtualized emulation of Cisco equipment and networking. It will surprise you in how much it can do. It's a really amazing product, especially for free. The only thing you have to do is register on the Cisco site. So not free, but at least free to you. There's no money you have to give anybody to be able to use that. I think that's a very good way to learn information that is well beyond the scope of Network Plus. But if you're getting into it and you think, this networking stuff's really interesting, how can I learn more right now? Packet Tracer. Now, I also have labs on my site that are specific to Network Plus. If you want to have some labs that are in a virtualized environment, pre-built, it's in the cloud, you just run it from your browser. Those are on my site as well. They're under the recommended products in the pull-down menu that's on my site. That may be also something you might want to look into. Either one of those works pretty good. Other questions. Let's see what other people have been asking. Other things that we have. So I'm kind of with this person. I have a MacBook Air, tried to install VirtualBox, but experienced a terrible experience. Is there another method for Macs? I would like to install Linux, Windows, i.e. other things as well. You know, the virtualized managers that are out there, there are some that are good, there are some that are okay. And there's also corner cases where you install it on your system and it doesn't work because of this thing. It sort of depends. And you certainly have challenges with MacBooks in that now all of these, the CPUs and all of these systems have changed to an M1 and M2. You've now got these higher end CPUs that are available on the MacBook. These are not Intel operating systems. These are not Intel CPUs. So some of the older software won't work on the newer MacBooks. If you're running Mac OS, I would recommend you take a look into Parallels. It is by far the most Mac OS integrated virtualization manager out there. It's remarkable how good it is. But it's the one that I've settled on my Mac OS systems, which I have an M1 system here, and it runs like a champ. I virtualize everything. I have web servers virtualized, Windows systems virtualized, Active Directory virtualized, and I would say the M1 and the M2 from Apple, it just cannot be beat for virtualization. It is so good. And Parallels is the software that I use to do that. That costs some money. It's a commercial software, but you start using it and you realize why. It's certainly not so expensive that it's outside the scope of what you can buy. It's actually quite reasonable and works just so good. Parallels is what I would recommend. And I don't get any money for that. That's just what I use and I like it a lot. So that's what I would recommend you do as well. At least have a look at it. And they let you download it and run it, I think, for a week or two or whatever it is, just to see how it runs. You could try it yourself and see if it solves some of the problems you were having. And then you can decide, is this something I should buy or not? That's up to you. I do also run VirtualBox on my system. I've not recently run it. Maybe I'll try this real quick. I don't think I've upgraded mine. I run Parallels so much that I've sort of gotten rid of everything else. Fusion was the other one that I run, which is a VMware product. Fusion, not as good as Parallels is. There's just something about that Parallels that they know what they're doing with Mac OS. I think it's Mac OS only, and I think that helps just a little bit. Other questions? Let's get them before the hour is up here. Let's see what we have. With the new A+ exams now up and running, what exam, A+, both exams, Network Plus or Security Plus has the most exam objectives? Security Plus. Security Plus has more exam objectives than anything else that I've seen anywhere. Security Plus is just enormous. Do you want the numbers? Let's do the numbers. It's going to be hard to compile these numbers, but I'm going to try to do it here real quick because I do have a Google Sheet with all of this information in it, but it's multiple sheets. So let's first start with A+. I have Network Plus. I think I have all three of them right here. So let's start with A+. Let's start with the 1101 and 1102. The 1101 has about 400 objectives. The 1102 has 580 objectives. So those are the individual bullets in there. So quite a difference between those two. The 1101 with about 400, the 1102 with about 600. So total, got about 1,000 objectives that you have to know for both A+ exams. So we'll say 1,000 for A+ total all the way through. Network Plus, those objectives all the way through, about 600. So the Network Plus has about the same number as the 1102. So that's about right. Half of the A+ is about a Network Plus. Okay. Now let's see if Security Plus really is the number I was talking about. If we look at the total number for Security Plus, just that single exam, one exam for Security Plus, 1,038 objectives. So effectively, all of A+ is just a little bit short of what all of the single Security Plus certification is. So there you go. There's the numbers. There's the tail of the tape, if you will, with A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. So that kind of helps you in getting through all of these. So I think that might help you with understanding what exam objectives are there and how big these are. That's why I say with the new Security Plus, it's just massive. Security Plus used to be the size, well, I think I have the number here. Security Plus, the previous version had 778 objectives. Now it has 1,038. So it has increased a third. I mean, that's significant in an increase. That's a lot. That's a big difference. So that's why I tell people, be ready for some studies for Security Plus. That's why I'm always impressed when somebody passes their Security Plus. Like, oh, you've been reading. You've been watching some videos if you went through Security Plus. It's enormous to be able to get there. Let's see what other things. Here's a good question that I get probably every month or so. Hey, Prof, sitting for my exam on Sunday. We're sitting here today on a Thursday. Any last-minute tips? Yes. And usually this is a good one to go with about a week before. So I got a week to my exam. Don't ask me, hey, I'm going into my exam in 2 hours. What can I do? I can't help you. I get that question a lot too. First thing is rewind the time and go back about 7 days and ask me the question again. But there's where you get your objectives. Go grab the exam objectives and go through each bullet. And if you can explain that bullet to someone standing next to you or to you in a mirror or to just someone, to the air, to the ether, and tell somebody, yes, here is what I think this thing does. And explain that bullet to somebody, you can take it off your list and go to the next bullet. But if you're looking at a bullet and you say, oh, I don't think I can explain that to someone, that's the one you circle and keep going through your list. Now you can go back through everything you circled or marked and say, here are the things I need to cram before I walk into that exam because clearly I don't know them well enough. That's what I would recommend. It's all about the exam objectives at that point. You really need to go through the objectives and step through them. That is one of the best ways to know, have I covered everything? That's exactly what you should do. For example, I was not kidding you. Wilfredo says, hey, I'm about to take the exam in 2 hours. What should I do in the fight? Oh, you're killing me. Killing me. Go grab the objectives and study as much as you can in 2 hours. That's what I would recommend. I did not see that before making that statement. So that was the perfect follow-up, which was actually posted after or before I made the statement as well. So that's how that works. It's all about 2 hours. You know, there's nothing you can do at this point. 2 hours is just not. Grab the course notes and read through as much as you can. There's more than 2 hours of work to work on there. So unfortunately, I can't help you very much with that one. So sad. 2 hours is just not enough time. Fry says, I have a 2-year degree in IT, just passed Security Plus. I got offered a field technician job. Is that a good start, Professor? My first job out of college with a business management degree was a field service technician job. So that's how I started in the industry. So it sort of has a soft spot in my heart for people that are, checking in the morning, picking up their equipment, and then heading out into the highways and byways to visit customers and resolve whatever problems they might be having with your knowledge and the hardware and the skills that you bring to the table. I thought I really got a lot of very fond memories of being a field service technician. Now, I did it. I moved to South Florida from North Florida. I moved to South Florida and took that job. So my first job was trying to negotiate the highways of South Florida from South Miami. I was based, my home was in sort of the Miami Lakes area. For those of you that know South Florida, my job was in South Miami, right next to South Miami Hospital. So that was quite a drive in the morning. And then I would immediately pick up my things and then drive around Dade, Broward County all day, and then drive back to South Miami, drop everything off, and then drive home. That was my day. So I lasted about 6 months doing that, which I think was pretty good. But it was a challenging job. I learned a lot in that job. I met a lot of great people in that job. It positioned me, and the people I met in that job positioned me to level up. So I leveled up into a corporate help desk. So a lot of people that are saying, oh, I don't want to start in a help desk. Okay, start in field service, and then you move up into a corporate help desk. That was much better. I could go from my home. I drove down to around the airport, the MIA every day. I was at a corporate desk. I never had to drive anywhere. I stayed that job for 5 years just because I was happy to be there. But I did learn a lot about operating systems and networking and security in that particular position. I was working for an insurance company. It's no longer there. But that was a good play. That allowed me to level up into a very nice corporate position with lots of benefits and a little bit of money. So that was, I can't help but recommend it. Yes, like I said, get your foot in the door. You never know where this is going to take you. And I guarantee you in IT, if you just apply yourself, you keep learning, you keep being curious about things, you keep asking questions, and you keep learning about the things that are around you, it naturally is going to position you well for moving up later. It's so good. And that's what I would recommend. Other questions. Let's keep going with some more questions that we have coming through. I need to scroll, talk too much, and then I scroll, and then I talk too much, which maybe that's just the way I am. That's normal. Those of you that have watched the study group before, of course, that's how it goes, and working through it. If I want to do cloud, should I get the A+ and then go into AWS or Azure? Yeah, those are two very good options. Either one of those is good. I think A+ is a good starting point regardless of what you want to do in IT. And if cloud interests you, that's a great place to go after that. A lot of people say, what do I do after I get my IT or my A+ certification if I want to get into IT? After A+, you can kind of think about what you want to do next. I think Network Plus is a very good, obvious next step, because if you do get into cloud or databases or servers or Linux or anything, you need to know about the network. So I think networking is a good foundational, Network Plus, a good foundational certification. But then after that, maybe then we go next to AWS, Azure, or some other. I think those are really the two clouds you should probably stick with at this point. Either one of those works very well for certifications, and you will find if you start looking at job postings, that's what they're asking for. If they're asking for something else in your area, then you should go with what that other thing happens to be. But either one of those is a pretty good strategy in my opinion. Ahmad, thank you so much for the $4.99 super chat. Ahmad says, I'm in an online boot camp. I don't know what that is. That teaches A+, Networking Plus, and Security Plus, along with Python and CEH. I have so many questions. Ahmad says, I feel overwhelmed. I feel overwhelmed with you. Any way to manage all the info? Well, I guess the first question I have, and this may be a little bit more challenging, the thing that I would recommend is, first I need to know, what is a boot camp? Because boot camp is not a great word for what I'm finding out there. Sometimes a boot camp means 5 days of 12-hour days. Sometimes a boot camp means 2 weeks of these 12-hour days. Sometimes a boot camp means 3 months of Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So it just depends on what you mean a boot camp is. Any type of training, though, that teaches A+, Network+, Security+, Python, and CEH, I'm not even sure what that is. How are you supposed to do that? How's a human supposed to be able to learn all of that and apply it in a way that's enough to earn your certifications? That's a challenge. Unless this is like I wouldn't even say an entire semester. This could be 6 weeks. This could be 6 months of content, quite honestly, and more. So that's a very aggressive schedule, regardless of how this boot camp is designed. It's difficult. I would probably, more than anything, and I don't know what your goal at the end of the boot camp is, but I would highly recommend kind of focusing on fundamentals. Get your A+, your Network+, maybe some of the Security+ content down. Catch as much Python as you probably can, and don't worry so much about the CEH right now. That's just way too much content that is way too broad across way too many different verticals, if you will, vertical markets. It's too much. And you're saying it to me. You're saying, I feel overwhelmed. I think you feel normal, quite honestly. I would feel overwhelmed at a boot camp like that. So not what I would worry about. Don't worry about being overwhelmed. Recognize that this amount of content would overwhelm anybody, and just try to get as much as you can out of this. I don't know if you're paying for this, if somebody else is paying for it. That happens sometimes. Employers say, you're going to boot camp. Go, we're paying for it. I don't want to go to boot camp. Doesn't matter, you're going. Okay, I'll just try to do the best. And that's all you can do, is just try to grab as much as you can, grab the documentation, try to get in there and get as much content. And that's why, generally speaking, for the 1 and 2 week sessions, if you see anything that says boot camp and it is a 1 or 2 week boot camp, do not go. Don't even worry. Don't go there. There's no way that someone can teach you in that short amount of time everything you would need to know. And if you are able to study beforehand and learn the topics, then you don't need the boot camp. So you can start to see where the differences are there. Doesn't work so well with those. So that's my recommendation. Thanks so much for the super chat. I really appreciate it. And I wish you the very best of that. Here's a highly technical question. Hey, there's a Rubik's Cube back there. There sure is, right there. It is an electronic version of the Rubik's Cube. It has a battery in it that at this point has discharged and will no longer charge up. But when you turn it on, it does colors, and you slide your finger to make it rotate, because it doesn't actually move. It's just a solid block, but it sort of virtually moves. But it was a great idea, but it does in practice, it doesn't work very well. I can solve a Rubik's Cube pretty quickly, because that's the geek I am. But that thing, I've just never got it to finally solve. There's too much of doing your finger. No, it doesn't work. So nope. So there's a lot of crazy stuff back here. There's a motherboard, and there's a keyboard, and a picture of a Atari joystick, and my YouTube stuff is back here, right? Yeah, where it is, the YouTube thing, and there's just a lot going on back there, isn't it? Really, I should make it much simpler back there, and working through it. Okay, let's see if I can fit in a couple of other questions before my voice goes out. And that's kind of that's how I set my schedule on these things. Can I still talk? We'll figure it out. So this is I think, as we look at it, some people are talking about books and other things. I'm gonna take this question because Lori and Mrs. Professor Messer talk about this. Thanks for all you do. I must know what your skincare routine / diet is. I am glowing. Brilliant educator and glow. Well, just keep eating well. You're not going to like this one. Don't drink anything. I haven't had a drink of an alcoholic. That's not true. I think I had some scotch a number of weeks ago, like a little bit. But prior to that, haven't had anything alcoholic to drink in, I don't know, years. Not because of any reason. I love some scotch. I'm a big fan of a craft beer. Don't get me wrong. But there's so many calories in it. There's so many calories in a beer and scotch. It's just horrible. And for those of you that, stay out of the sun, eat well, don't just do the chips and salsa every night. The beers and the scotches are for very special occasions, and you should have half of what you normally have. You really are what you eat and drink. And you'll be surprised how many calories you don't have to deal with when you aren't drinking alcohol. And that, and go work out a little bit. Go walk. Doesn't have to, I like lifting heavy things and putting them back down again, but you don't have to do that. Go take a walk. Go shoot some hoops. Just go outside and get some fresh air. That's my secret, if you will, to what I think you should do. So definitely a non-technical question, but sort of speaks in. We want all of you here as long as you can possibly be here. And, when you start getting older, you start seeing people your age not do well, get sick, have more pills they have to take. Try to avoid that as much as you can. It's very hard in IT. We have jobs where we sit in a chair all day. It is so difficult to stay healthy. You really have to think about just like you strategize for your exams, you should strategize for your health. And same thing applies. And I think there's nothing special I'm doing here for the camera, but it's really more about what are you doing every day to make sure that you're going to be here a long time and that you're able to continue at least being in a position where you can do this type of thing. I think it's pretty important. Do you cover, I love this question. Nobody likes my answer. Let's see if you like my answer. Zach says, do you cover all of the port names and numbers within the Security Plus YouTube videos? Any tips for memorizing them and the acronyms? And in parentheses, the necessary ones. Great question. How many port numbers, if you had to guess, how many port numbers are listed in the CompTIA exam objectives for Security Plus? None. There are no port numbers. 0 port number. Not even 0 is listed. Null. There are null port numbers in the Security Plus exam objectives. There aren't any. Now, if you go to other study materials, they will tell you it is so important that you memorize this entire page of port numbers for Security Plus. I have no idea where they got that from. And if you look at the objectives, I have no idea where they got that from. I sort of do. I'm sort of playing ignorant here for just a moment, just to make a point. I do know where they got that from, but I think they are misguided in that advice. And let me tell you why. So once you get to Security Plus, the assumption is that you've already gone through A Plus and you've already gone through Network Plus. And as we've seen, there's plenty of port numbers in A Plus. There's plenty of port numbers in Network Plus. And I think what CompTIA is assuming at that point is that you have some familiarity in at least some of the most popular port numbers. And by some of the most popular, I'm really talking like maybe 5 port numbers. Maybe. But here's my argument against studying. I don't think you should study any port numbers. I don't think you should spend time memorizing any port numbers. 0. And I don't think you should study port numbers because port numbers are not specifically listed in the exam objectives. Oh, but wait, Professor Messer, I have heard stories of people who have obviously violated their NDA who said in the exam there was a question that would have helped me had I known port numbers. That may actually be the case. And that's why I said there's probably a handful of port numbers you should know. You should know 80, 443, 22. Gosh, any others? Probably not. That's kind of it. Know those three. See, there's three. And now you know them. Now we're done. The reason I say this is because they aren't in the objectives. And it's more of an issue of where do you spend your time? Do you spend your time, and I've seen these, somebody showed me once a sheet that must have had 50 port numbers on it, and they were memorizing it for their Security Plus. And I had to tell them, none of those are on the exam objectives. Yeah, but I've spent a week studying these. I bet you have, because there's 50 of them here. I don't even know all these port numbers. And I spend time on this stuff, really studying it all the time. So my argument to you is that the time that you spent going through this list that came from somewhere, it's not from the exam objectives, this made-up list that may or may not be accurate, that may or may not have anything to do with port numbers on the exam, that may or may not even be important for you to know ever in your career. You could spend a week studying those, or you could spend a week studying what's in the exam objectives, which are going to appear on the exam. There's no question that what's on the objectives could show up as a question on the exam. So do you spend your time studying a bunch of port numbers that might come up in one question on the exam? Or do you spend your time studying everything else? Because as I mentioned before, if you know everything listed in the exam objectives, you're going to pass your exam. Period. That's it. That's the way it works. Why would you ever spend your time studying something that's not in the list of things that you know is going to let you pass the exam? That's my argument. I understand the argument the other side. I just question, how in the world are you going to get a list of port numbers when there is no list? How do you know you're really studying the right list? You don't, because there isn't one, because it doesn't exist. And by the way, you're wasting time. You should have been studying something else where you would have gotten the question right and gotten those answers anyway. That's why. That's where I focus. That's the reason. What are the updates? I guess updates of the new A+ exams. They came out in April. You missed it. There was a party. No, we didn't have a party. But in April of 2022, so about 10 months ago, the new exams were released. So they're already out. You already have them. They're the ones we're working on now, and they'll be around until October of 2025 or so. October, November. Other questions. Let me take a sip, and we may be able to extend this. Talk amongst yourself for about 10 seconds. Okay. May be able to do 2 more questions. So other questions in here. Well, this is a good follow-up to the bootcamp question where I said you should never do a bootcamp unless it is like this one that Scott went to. I went through a boot camp through a university. It was a semester long, 3 times a week. That's a class. It's not a boot camp. I know they called it a boot camp because boot camps are cool. It was more of a marketing term. But if you're at a university and you attend a class 3 times a week for the entire semester, that's just class. You went to a class. You didn't go to a boot camp. You went to a class. Did you do any push-ups? No. Was there anything that was 1 week long and you were done? No. No, you went to class. But who wants to go to class? Nobody wants to go to class. We want to go to boot camp, which is more fun, really. And quite honestly, these classes that are certificate type classes or technology classes that call themselves boot camps are fun. They're great because you're really doing some neat stuff with technology. But that's not the boot camp I'm talking about. When I specifically mentioned in my explanation of boot camp, if it's a week long or 2 weeks long, you should not be doing that. But a semester long, you're going 3 times a week. That's cool. That's good. That's actually fantastic. That's advisable. That's probably a great learning experience too. So I think that's fantastic. I just don't think it's a boot camp. I know they call it a boot camp, but it's not boot camp. Um, what other things do we have here? A few things I've mentioned, so I'm going to kind of skip over a few other things. Hey, do I have any fudge this year? Here's a good question. Those of you that are familiar with what we do here, we know that we're big fans of Uncle Phil's fudge. What? You don't know about Uncle Phil's fudge? It's the best fudge you can find. There's Uncle Phil. That's a good-looking fella right there. Uncle Phil, full disclosure. He's not my uncle. He's my brother. He's my kid's uncle. So Uncle Phil makes fudge in Orlando. And he brought some for Thanksgiving. And we had creamsicle, I had a chocolate and peanut butter, and a key lime fudge. It was ridiculous. Those are the types of things. He has 40 different flavors on his website. I wish I had, he has online ordering so he can ship it to you. There's the creamsicle one. It was ridiculous. Oh, he's like a candy cane. How come? Hey, Phil, you didn't bring me a candy cane? All right. I got to call Uncle Phil. Maybe I'll see him at Christmas. We got to get that. There's the key lime. And he's got vegan fudge as well. It's on this list. He's got pages of stuff here to go through. I don't have any specific discounts for him right now. I need to get in touch with him and see if he'd like to do that. So check back with me next week, and maybe I'll have some for the Network Plus study group. But he has such good fudge. If you are in the area, he has a great Instagram. If you're in the Orlando area, he goes to a lot of the weekend craft shows and things like that. So if you see him out, tell him hey, tell him I said hi, and get some of his fudge because it's just ridiculous. It is so good. I still had some left over. I had some creamsicle this week of creamsicle fudge. Yeah, I'm doing a slice at a time, just a tiny piece after dinner so I can get that in there. But it's so good. He's really got a flair for it. He says he wants to have like 200 flavors and just have it everywhere. And if anybody can do it, he can absolutely do it. There's good stuff there. Here's a good one. Do you know when they will release the new Security Plus exam? It came out in November of 2020. Okay, so we would expect that it would be, I actually have this written down. So let's not have me figure it out. Let's have me look at my notes because I made a document with all of these retirement dates in here so I could just copy and paste. So for Security Plus, the Security Plus was released November the 12th of 2020, which if you count 3.5 years, that's how long it usually takes for them to retire an exam. It should be retired somewhere around, the estimated retirement is May of 2024. There you go. So I don't even have to, in 2023, I might start it at the end of 2023, but we probably won't even have updated exam objectives until the end of 2023, beginning of 2024, if it's coming out in May of 2024. That's not true. It retires in 2024. That means that the new one will come out 6 months before that if they keep their calendar. So probably the middle of 2023, I'll get the objectives and start working on them. You won't see the release until later on in the year, but it's going to be around, and the current version is going to be around until May of 2024. So you got plenty of time to do anything you would like relating to Security Plus. There are no worries there. You got lots to work through. Other questions? Let's see what else I have here. Would I consider joining Twitch to stream? It's a better platform to stream. It's actually a more difficult platform for me to stream. Ironically, YouTube is just so easy. You click a button, it's there. So I don't have any current plans to move to Twitch. There's some neat ideas. I watch a lot of Twitch streams. I love the gaming world. I'm usually on EVE Online at night, playing very poorly. I'm awful. So if I'm the one you want to gank every time. If you want to blow somebody up in their spaceship, I'm your guy. because I'm good at blowing up. But from a platform, there's a lot of great things about Twitch that I really like. I like the contribution capabilities. I like some of the flexibility. I'm just adding this lower third that you see to have this here. You know, having that capabilities, I had to add myself. Well, it's a lot of things built into Twitch that allows me to do that, and I don't use it. But it's really a gaming platform, and it doesn't quite have it's not quite the right platform for me. So no plans right now for Twitch, but who knows? Other questions. Let's see. This is a good one because it kind of makes sense for some of the things. Hey, any update about your Network Plus Practice exam? The question is around, will it be released soon? Well, that is very presumptive. I've mentioned in previous study groups that I wanted to have a Network Plus Practice Exams book. You've already seen the A+, it's this one. It takes a number of months to write one of these things. Only thing I can really tell you now is I don't know when the release will be. The standard response I usually give is, I'm hoping to have something out in the coming months, which is probably pretty good. That's probably a pretty good estimate, the coming months. Work is being done actively on it. However, it's not a dream. It really does exist. There's really work being done on it, but I have to write it. So that's why these things just don't come out. I could have hired a third party to provide me with content, and I could have hired people in a dark room somewhere to write questions, but it never ends up very well. I've tried some things like that where I could edit, like they could start it and then I could tweak it and then we could publish it and it'd go faster. But the reality is it doesn't. There's a lot of work that goes into creating these questions and creating them in a way that mirrors the complexity and the style of CompTIA. And it's not completely obvious in how that can be done. So it does take me a bit of time to do it right. It takes a little longer, but I think it is a better, it's a better quality when I do it that way. So is it slow? Yeah, it takes some time. Is it worth it? I think it is. And I'm just happier having a higher quality product than one that's just good enough. And we sort of see, and there's plenty of good enough products in this industry. As you've probably seen, you've got practice exams that aren't even asking you questions on topics that are in the exam objectives. Like, where are they even asking this? Oh, it's from the previous version of the exam. They just kept it in their practice questions for some reason. Well, that doesn't help anybody. That's bad quality. That's poor quality. I want my practice exams to be as specific and to the objectives as it can be. So it just takes a little bit more time, but we are working on it. And I cannot thank you enough for asking, because every time somebody asks, it keeps the fire going. And I really do believe it's pretty good. This question's an odd one, and I love odd questions. So we're going to talk about it. Nigel says, the learning objectives are all over the place. For example, L01 mobile devices, I guess that's section 1. I don't know what that is. Of mobile devices of 1101 is on page 345. I don't know what book you're looking at, though. Professor Messer's study notes are in the same order as that. So if you look at my notes, section 1.1 is the same as section 1.1 as your exam objectives. But that's kind of normal. The exam objectives are not written in any particular order other than grouping similar technologies together. So mobile devices is section 1. Networking is section 2. You know, the cloud is section 3, or no, security is section 3. Cloud. So you go through these different sections, but the author of a book may want to teach you in a different style, or they may want to teach you different things first. And so many books, in fact, most books, do not follow the CompTIA exam objectives, because every author has their own style and way of doing it. There are a number of books out there you may find, though, that do follow the same format, that follow the same structure all the way through. And the course notes obviously do that because I put all of my content into that format. What can help you, however, if you go to the book where mobile devices on page 345, whatever book that happens to be, I guarantee you at the beginning of that chapter or in the index or in an appendix that's in the back is they cross-reference. This chapter comes from the 220.1101 exam objectives, section 1.1 mobile devices. So you can kind of tell when you start reading the chapter, oh, this is the section of the exam objectives that we're dealing with right now. And since you know that, you can then cross-reference them back to any of my materials because all of my materials are numbered to match the exam objectives, and that's why. In my very first set of videos that I did for the 601 series, we talked about that earlier. So back in the day, I also did like a book author. I said, well, I want to put this first and then put that second and put this third. And the immediate feedback I got was, well, I can't find anything now. My book's in one order, the objectives are in another order, and your videos are in a third order. Now I can't find anything. And I said, well, you're right. You can't find anything. This was a bad idea. So from that point on, I made sure that all of my materials have numbering in them that match the exam objectives, and the actual format of them match the exam objectives as well. But that's normal for a book. Don't think that the book's better or worse because of that. That's just normal. That's just the way. Since we're on it, Zaporium says, can you tell us when the current test for Network Plus will retire? I can. The Intent 008 estimated retirement is August of 2025. See, it was right there. So that was an easy one. August of 2025. That's because it was just released in September of 2021. So it's relatively new, the current Network Plus version. Plenty to look at there. What else here where we are going through? Okay. And the problem with books, going back to this, because there's more of a conversation going on in the chat about books and their format, this sort of the way books are. Occasionally, you will find a book that uses the same format as the exam objectives, but it's sort of rare because I will tell you, even though I use the same structure as the exam objectives, it is probably not the best format for learning. It would be better if certain things were first and certain things were second and certain things were third. I'll give you an example of this. So on the 220.1101, the Core 1 exam for A+, there's a networking section. And in the networking section, they jump. Let's see what the exam objectives actually say. So I'm going to pull up a set of the exam objectives for the 1101. If I could find them. That's the real challenge for me. There we go. And let's pull up the objectives for the 1101 full screen. Let's scroll. And for the 1101, there we go. That's section 2. We'll keep going up. The 1101, mobile devices. Now I have to remember what I was doing. So in this mobile devices section are all the things we have to know for that particular piece. Given a scenario, install and configure laptop hardware and components. Oh, I was talking about networking. So that was network. Here's networking. The first thing in networking. You haven't even talked about networks yet. There was some talk of Bluetooth up in the previous version, but not a lot. But the first section of networking is compare and contrast transmission control protocol, TCP, and user datagram protocol, UDP ports, protocols, and their purposes. And the first thing it does is give you a list of all these protocols and ports. What the heck is that? I don't even know what you're talking about. Imagine jumping into this, knowing nothing about networking, and suddenly 20 and 21 is the file transfer protocol, or FTP. 22 is secure shell, or SSH. 23 is telnet. What? I'm done. I'm out of here. Finished. You'd throw it all away and just go do something else. I should probably raise horses, and you're off doing something else completely. So if you go back and look at my exam layout, though, that is one of the few times when I do not follow the same format as CompTIA. Because how are you supposed to start with ports without any knowledge of ports? Kind of hard to do, right? So let's look at my layout for exam objectives. So we're just going to look at the training course on my site and the different videos that are there. So there's section 1, section 2, networking, ports and protocols. But notice that we don't start with common network ports. We start with introduction to IP. Introduction to IP is not in the exam objectives. So it's that video where I talk about what does this network do? How do we get data from one side of the network to the other? What is TCP/IP? What is port numbers? What is TCP? What is UDP? So I want to lay a foundation first, and then I jump into network ports. So I don't ignore the ports. They're still in here, but I wanted to give you an understanding of what the network does, how it works, what is important about this. Why are we even talking about port numbers and being able to do that? And that's why. Interestingly enough, I've gotten a number of emails from people that say, why'd you throw this introduction to IP thing in here? It's not even in the objectives. You're wasting my time. Some have been kind of angry. Why do I have to watch this? Because if you don't watch it, you'll have no idea what I'm talking about when we talk about port numbers. That's why. That's the important part, I think, is leading you into the pieces of that. Fortunately, I don't have to do that very much. Most of the videos and the things we're looking at are well, you can create and establish the baseline as you're working into the objectives. So you don't have to create a separate video. But I just thought for networking, it was pretty important before we talk about port numbers that we at least talk about what a network is and how it works and how do we get data from one side of the network to the other. So that's why that's there. And being able to work through all of those. So I think if you are worrying about where to find things, check your books. Most books will cross-reference and tell you what section of the exam objectives certain content comes from, and then you can effectively cross-tabulate that to anything. Back to the exam objectives, back to my videos, back to the course notes. And of course, in my practice exams book, all of the practice exams at the end have a list of all of the all of the different numbers that come directly from the exam objectives. So you can hit the QR code or click the link, and it takes you right to that objective so you can find what you're looking for. I think that's your most important thing, is to not worry so much about layout and worry about, have I understood the topic? The books are going to lead you a different path, but eventually you're going to end up learning everything the right way anyhow. You're going to get all of it in there. So that's the important part, is make sure you learn everything, whether it's in the same order as the exam objectives or in an order of an author. Either way, you're learning everything ultimately anyway. And that's the important part. Well, I think we went a little bit of overtime, but I think that brings us to the end of today's study group. I want to thank you for being here in that first hour. Thank you for your time in the after show. Such good questions today. I really just wish I could wrap it all up and do it all over again. We love doing these live streams. If you enjoyed yourself, you got something out of it, I'd love it if you gave me a thumbs up. Costs you nothing, and it means the world to me. It would really be great. If you subscribe to the channel, I don't know what I'd do with myself. That would just be way too much. I appreciate everything you're doing with that. Thank you for your support of being here. Thank you for your support with our course notes and our practice exams and everything else we do on the website. We love doing these live streams. Come on back next week. We've got our Network Plus study group on Wednesday of next week. Sign up for that. Make sure you know that we're going to do that live stream. All brand new questions, all network related. I love the networking piece of this, and we'll do some more of those. Everybody have a great holiday season. If we don't talk until after the new year, I hope it is as fantastic as you want it to be. We look forward to seeing you on the next study group. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the A+ study group. Thanks, everybody.